Hello all, it's your girl Tiffany, Madam-licious Black Beauty, your poetic psychic Pisces, High Priestess, also known as your modern day nun, one whom isn't within a coven, a convent, or a covenant. I do thank you all for listening and for watching on today. If you all would be so kind to please like, share, and subscribe, it would be greatly, greatly appreciated. This is going to be another one of my story time previews with yours truly, which is myself, Poetic Psychic Pisces, High Priestess. The title of my story time is The Remarkable Life of CHATA, PESHA, A Sinner's Transgression. Okay. I hope you all enjoy. I hope you all are doing well on today, guys. Okay, so without any further ado, let's get started. The Remarkable Life of CHATA, PESHA, A Sinner's Transgression. Introduction. Just another average Joe, homegrown, bred and fed in the U.S. of A., born into sin, forced to embrace a cruel, cold-hearted, evil, wicked world amongst selfish, greedy, hypocritical individuals whom could never understand the hidden challenges, pain, sorrow, misery, or built-up rage trapped inside the toxic, broken, awkward, perversely confused, and shattered mind of a fragilely beautiful, narcissistic sociopath and psychopath alike with a high IQ, confined in the wrong body of multiple personalities, but brilliantly smart despite unfortunate circumstances. Yet ironically, no one could imagine or even fathom the horrific outcome of the delicate triggers being activated within someone most would least expect, which would later frustratingly be proven to give the federal authorities a run for their money in the wrong direction, as they chased all the wrong leads for an sub they had no idea if were man or woman. Ignorantly unaware, they're really in search of the world's first ever in history, most notorious international transgender serial killer. Chapter 1. Tragic, Unfortunate Beginnings. Born in the small town of Hannibal, Missouri, with a population of only around a little over 18,000 in the 80s to parents native to the land, mere simpletons in their day, whom should have never met, less alone procreate, but surely Judith Breedlove and Manuel Cain, unfortunate collaboration of careless lust, born them a child out of wedlock, whom they named CHATA, PESHA, which is Hebrew. Although different than other children's names given in that time, it was definitely fitting for the circumstance at hand. As well did it carry great meaning for those in the know. CHATA meant sin or sinner, and PESHA meant transgression. CHATA, the Hebrew word often translated as sin, in English Bibles is the word CHATA, which means missing the mark. CHATA is an error, mistake, or a case of missing the target. PESHA, the Hebrew meaning for transgression, a deliberate rebellion against Yahweh. This word suggests defiance, sin, going beyond the limits, betrayal of relationships, and trespass. Nevertheless, Judith and Manuel didn't find much need to stay together after their mistake, as they call it. So not long after CHATA PESHA was forced into this world, did Judith and Manuel part ways, except for the occasional sexual escapade and drug binge. Over the years, CHATA PESHA's parents made it all too clear they hated the child they created together, which was expressed in various extremely abusive ways, which ranged from physical, emotional, psychological, and sexual abuse. CHATA PESHA became very nonchalant, antisocial, secluded, and isolated within the mind, resulting in severe mental disabilities being activated. CHATA PESHA's mental illness ranged from self-injury disorder, narcissistic personality disorder, socio-psychopath disorder, dissociative identity disorder. Her multiple personalities were permanent and had their own individual persona, which included CHATA, PESHA, Tranica, Paul, and Shelley, just to name a few. Unfortunately, schizophrenia and bipolar combined also were amongst the long list of other disabilities CHATA PESHA had, which was untreated. While being forced to grow up very fast, ironically enough, CHATA PESHA excelled in academics at school, although the awkward child became very troubled mentally, resulting in other peers either straying away or teasing and bullying the smart yet strange student. Although distant, quiet, and misunderstood, CHATA PESHA preferred solitude, as well as a growing desire to hurt and mutilate things. A close-kept secret until mysteriously dead animals began to surface all over the neighborhood, yet no one could unearth the culprit responsible for the awful misdeeds. CHATA, whom by now preferred being called PESHA, had a severe hatred for self. After years of abuse by parents, peers, and complete strangers, PESHA began to self-torture to numb the pain already felt that was buried deep inside. Obvious signs of disturbance began to emerge in PESHA's mental health, but PESHA's parents cared not to seek professional help, and since PESHA made good grades in school, the matter wasn't looked into further. PESHA was born male, although very feminine in appearance. His skin was smooth as silk, eyes were as bright and green as grass in the summertime, hair full, fluffy, and flowing down the center of his back. Yet still a growing boy, it was apparent CHATA PESHA was sure to be well over 6 feet tall. Although far from athletic, PESHA was fit and slim, with the physique of a girl or woman, perhaps all of which contributed to PESHA's mind frame in regards to his thoughts concerning himself. PESHA felt trapped and confused. He felt like a girl, yet undoubtedly had the anatomy of a boy, which soon enough brought about his mental conflict referring to his sexuality. After years of sexual abuse at the hands of his own father, uncle, and their drunken, drug-infused friends, and even a pastor overseeing summer camp, PESHA had developed a liking to the same sex after repeatedly being turned out, as well as the fear that no girls would like him because of what he had endured. Strangely enough, Pesha was beat often by his mother, who called him all kinds of degrading names like queer, fag, just for being feminine. Such a hypocrite she was because she knew very well what Pesha's father and uncle had done to him. Pesha hated his parents and by high school had vowed to be rid of them once and for all. He fantasized on different ways to kill the pair of them often. By now, Pesha had gotten away with numerous murders before, of animals, of course. Besides the torture and the mutilation of household pets and wild animals, Pesha had pushed a young girl off a cliff during a hiking field trip. No one even seen it coming and assumed the eighth grader just slipped while horseplaying around. In reality, Pesha grew tired of the girl named Samantha teasing him and calling him weirdo. So he pushed her and watched the girl fall to her death. Shamefully, while everyone was in a panic, Pesha noticed he got an erection from the adrenaline rush of killing the young girl and watching her die. Pesha never told a soul what he did and relished in the fact he got away with it. Now hungry for more blood, as the voices in Pesha's head takes over, he was bound to enact a plan to massacre his parents by the time he graduated and went off to college. Much time had passed, and now Pesha was embarking upon his senior year. His mental health grew worse as he yet and still had a craving, desire, and thirst for blood. Pesha's father had developed an illness from his prolonged drug use, but Pesha wasn't going to let him get off that easy after all his years of unrelenting abuse, especially since Pesha began to dress like a girl during his high school years. Manuel told Pesha, "If you want to act and dress like a girl, then I'm going to treat you like one." Manuel brutally sodomized Pesha every day since until he fell ill and weak. But the beatings from Pesha's mother never ceased, and she grew jealous. Manuel no longer desired her and took up with his own son, Pesha, instead. Chapter 2. Summer before senior year. Pesha was forced to take care of his dying sickly dad, whom summoned him to his old run-down house located in the backwoods of Hannibal. Pesha found it was no better time than the present to act on his murderous plot. Even though Manuel was in such poor condition, he couldn't get enough of his drugs of choice. Knowing this, Pesha decided to take advantage of the situation. Every day, Pesha was expected to run errands for his dad, cook his meals, and clean up. But Pesha was fed up with his disgusting father's demands. So on June 3rd of 2001, Pesha fed his father a deadly overdose of meth and heroin cocktail, which he felt the effects of immediately. As Manuel's eyes widened, bucked as ever in shock while grabbing his chest with one hand and reaching for Pesha with the other, he could only mutter a few words, "You son of a bitch." In that moment, Pesha grabbed a bat as he watched him in amazement. He took the bat that Manuel often threatened him with, and he beat his father to death. Blood spattered everywhere as Pesha caved his dad's skull in. When satisfied with the outcome of his dad's death, Pesha retained a butcher knife from the kitchen and cut his father's penis off and inserted it in his mouth. Absent of emotion, Pesha cleaned himself up nicely and proceeded to go do his father's errands as if all was normal. While Pesha was gone, Manuel's drug buddies and brother had stopped by to find the grisly scene. By the time Pesha returned, local police had swarmed and blocked off the property. Pesha played his role and acted surprised, and by the end of the day, local authorities had ruled Manuel's murder as a drug-infused crime of passion, never suspecting Pesha at all. Pesha couldn't contain his excitement as he ran home while fully erect. Once Pesha reached his destination, he masturbated and climaxed over the graves of the dead animals he had buried in his backyard. Chapter 3. The Start of Senior Year. August 2001. Pesha was excited to conclude his high school years so he could depart from the little town of horror he grew up in. With plans already arranged for his future, Pesha was eager to see the world, if only he had any idea of what was yet to come. Although it was hell on earth to deal with his mother, Judith, whom was spiraling out of control daily, especially since Pesha decided to identify as a female indefinitely. But his plans to eliminate her later in the year became more and more tempting every day to once and for all complete the family annihilation which turned him on so greatly. However, patience is a virtue, so no matter the endless torment Pesha dealt with at home, he once again vowed not to act upon his plans until he graduated high school, as to not draw suspicion from others since his father's untimely death over the summer. Furthermore, you'd think senior year would be as cool as a breeze, but of course the jocks made a mockery of Pesha, making him, now her, the butt of their jokes every chance they got. If only they knew the mental decline of a narcissistic socio-psychopath. Regardless, Pesha had other things more important to focus on, which occupied the majority of Pesha's time. That is into the first time ever Pesha found interest in a girl. Clara Thompson was her name, and she was just as smart as Pesha. She even seemed to be a loner as well. Much to Pesha's surprise, Clara spoke to her first after noticing the constant staring. Lost for words, Pesha had no idea about how to engage in a conversation with a girl. Pesha had never before felt attracted to any females, as they were too stuck up and made fun of him in front of their other friends. But something was different about Clara, who had transferred to their school recently. However, Pesha and Clara hit it off well, eventually becoming fast friends. That is until tragedy struck, unfortunately, all too sudden. Some of the other students began to get to Clara, teasing her about liking the freak. Some rumors spread about Clara being a lesbian and Pesha being a transvestite, which completely outraged Clara. She surely liked girls, but had no idea Pesha was really born a boy. She felt humiliated and embarrassed, which she took her anger out on Pesha. One day after school, Clara yelled and screamed uncontrollably, hitting Pesha in the process. She blamed Pesha for not telling her the truth, which triggered Pesha severely. Pesha being born a boy was the least of the problem. Clara had no idea she had befriended someone very dangerous, not in his right mind. At this point, Pesha had taken about all she could take when, without warning, she snapped. While the pair of them walked in the park, Pesha picked up a rock and repeatedly hit Clara in the head until she lay motionlessly alongside the flowing creek. Pesha's worst fears had come true. Deep down, he always knew no woman would want or like or even love him unconditionally. Yet unsympathetically, Pesha pushed Clara's body into the creek and walked away. Days after, Clara was reported missing and thought to have run away after all the bullying at school. Clara was never seen or heard from again until her body was discovered by fishermen later in the year. Even then, it was believed that Clara must have slipped and fell, hitting her head on the bed of rocks along the creek and drowned. Her death was ruled an accident, and the case was closed. Pesha remained to herself until the end of the year. When prom rolled around, Pesha had a few tricks up her sleeve to get back at the jocks that made her life a living hell. Although uninterested in prom itself, Pesha was a part of the crew from the drama department, decorating for the festivities, giving her access to all of the refreshments as well. Pesha spiked the punch with alcohol and liquefied cocaine. When all the jocks and their groupies arrived, Pesha snuck out and planted weed and alcohol in their cars. Then Pesha casually walked away, hiding out nearby to get a good view of what her devious behavior would bring later in the evening. As expected, everyone at the prom got totally wasted, and soon enough, when people started acting weird and getting sick, the chaperones threw the jocks out thinking they were responsible for the damage. A few were entitled and refused to leave, demanding they had no part in the matter. Soon, police and emergency services were called. Meanwhile, Kelly and Brannon, her all-American boyfriend, took off in a hurry, speeding down the street on their way out. When the police arrived and searched the others' vehicles, but of course, drugs and alcohol were found, which they claimed wasn't theirs. They were arrested anyway, and their parents had to pick them up from the police precinct. Pesha took pleasure in the chaos she caused, especially when later finding out Kelly and Brennan had a catastrophic accident resulting in their immediate deaths. Brennan was said to be speeding, but alcohol and drugs were found in the vehicle and as well as in both of their systems. In conclusion, the entire prom fiasco was blamed on Brennan, which is believed to be the reason he and Kelly took off so fast in a hurry. Nothing could be further from the truth, however. But in Pesha's deranged mind, the entire event was a massive turn-on that pleased her greatly. Chapter 4, Graduation Day. This day Pesha looked the most forward to had finally arrived. In spite of all Pesha had endured, she was an honors student, graduating with a full scholarship to Princeton University. Judith had no desire to attend her only son's graduation. Her apathy was beyond appalling as she sat chain-smoking cigarettes in between snorting lines of cocaine and straight shots of vodka. Her only concern was that Pesha better have some money when he got back. Yeah, Pesha's mother still referred to her as a he and forced Pesha to take odd jobs to support her habits. But poor Judith had no idea that this was the day of reckoning. After Pesha readied herself for the graduation celebration, she also set a blaze to the family's home. Judith had passed out drunk briefly and had no clue as to what Pesha was up to. Pesha turned on all the eyes to the stove and placed a pot of cooking oil over the fire. Pesha also left the full gas cans for the lawnmower in the house as well. Then, like it was nothing at all, the emotionless Pesha walked out the front door, never looking back again. By the time Pesha made it to her graduation assembly, her house was fully engulfed in flames, with Mother Dearest inside burning alive. Nearing the end of the ceremony, came rushing in the fire chief and the chief of police to see if Pesha was indeed in attendance and to alert her of the tragic news of her mother's death. Strangely enough, they noticed Pesha didn't show a bit of emotion, as only a blank expression fell upon her face as she nonchalantly yet matter-of-factly said, "So what am I supposed to do now?" With her cold, absent stare. The chiefs suspiciously glanced at each other when one of them said, "Well, since you're 18 now, Pesha, you can pretty much do what you want, but we'll put together some resources for you and try to locate a next of kin. How's that sound?" "Fine," Pesha simply stated while walking away very calmly. Chapter 5. In the meantime, in between time. Local authorities took the initiative to find Pesha's next of kin, which unfortunately for her was none other than her Uncle Samuel Kane, who had moved to Springfield, Missouri after the death of his brother Manuel Kane. For the first time, Pesha was seeing a therapist since her mother's death, whom found Pesha to be very disturbed. But she suggested Pesha should move to live with her uncle until she went off to college. Pesha wasn't thrilled about the idea of going to live with yet another of her abusers, but later agreed, considering she had unfinished business with Uncle Samuel. Pesha did, however, refuse medication or any further therapeutic services, as there was nothing more the doctor could do to help Pesha. Samuel Kane was contacted and promptly showed up the next day to pick up Pesha. It was a long drive back to Springfield, so it wasn't long before the awkward silence turned into strange, strained conversation. Uncle Samuel broke the ice right away with saying, "So you think you're a girl now, huh?" Pesha just rolled her eyes in disgust while staring out the window. "Yeah, well, your daddy told me about that much before he died," Samuel stated. Pesha sighed loudly, replying, "Yeah, so what? Guess we made a real chick out of you, huh?" Samuel snapped back while laughing out loud. Tensions grew as Pesha tightened her fist at the remark Samuel made. Noticing this, Samuel swerved over, fast, quick, and in a hurry, pulling off the side of the road, and snatched up Pesha faster than lightning. "Now don't think you're gonna try any of that weird shit on me, like you did your daddy." "Yeah, I know what happened to him. Yeah, I know you know what happened to him." "I don't care what the cops say," Samuel said. While yet still holding Pesha in a headlock, Samuel continued in saying, "Now I agree to you staying with me until you go to college, but this ain't gonna be no free ride, girly boy. You got that?" "Yeah, whatever," Pesha mumbled. "I got just the right job for you that'll make you a lot of money," Samuel explained while loosening his grip around PESHA's neck, only to force her head down to his dirty crotch. PESHA was forced to perform fellatio on his uncle, seeing as he had no other choice. Yeah, that's it, Samuel moaned. You'll be perfect for the job I got lined up for you. After his climax, Samuel pushed PESHA away aggressively, and they hit the road again. PESHA wasn't settled in Springfield but a few days before being introduced to prostitution for the first time. PESHA surely made a lot of money. It was amazing to PESHA just how many men secretly in darkness desired other boys and men. The lifestyle, however, afforded PESHA hormone treatments, breast implants, and butt injections. And although pervert Uncle Samuel took the majority of her money, PESHA managed to save and hide more than $50,000 by the time she was due to leave for college. There was only that unfinished business PESHA had with Uncle Samuel she needed to take care of. Early one morning, PESHA packed all of her things as Uncle Samuel and his girlfriend slept, thinking she was still out on the stroll. PESHA took the 9mm gun she had one of her tricks to get for her, and she emptied every round into her Uncle Samuel's body. His girlfriend awoke startled from the gunshots and begged for her life. PESHA gave Kim a blank stare and said, "Sorry, but not sorry. You gotta go too," as he placed the gun in Kim's hand, forced the barrel to her temple, and pulled the trigger. PESHA, in a zone, staged the crime scene to look like a murder-suicide, removed her gloves, and left Uncle Samuel's house forever. Chapter 6, Off to See the Wizard. PESHA was finally free of her troubled past and ready to start a new beginning. Although still plagued with severe mental and emotional disabilities, PESHA was good at hiding it for the most part from prying eyes unless triggered or provoked to violence. However, PESHA yet and still had a yearning, bloodthirsty desire as the voices of her multiple personalities took over her mind and body. Nevertheless, PESHA made her way to the Springfield-Branson National Airport to catch her first ever flight out of Missouri and headed to New Jersey to check in for college at Princeton University. With the anticipation of a bigger state and a lot more people, PESHA felt strange, which was odd because PESHA had never experienced extreme nervousness before. Interestingly enough, the faint feelings quickly subsided and faded away as PESHA boarded the plane. From the gripping moment of takeoff, PESHA oddly glanced out the window for the duration of the 2-hour and 25-minute trip. Chapter 7, Touchdown. The flight successfully landed, and at last PESHA had reached her destination in New Jersey. She casually collected her belongings and then sought out the nearest transportation available to take her to the college. PESHA had no worries as to her living accommodations as they were already taken care of in advance. PESHA even afforded herself a private room to maintain her privacy, secrecy, and oddities. Chapter 8, The Arrival. PESHA had finally arrived and graced Princeton University with her eerie presence. Surprisingly, PESHA was pleased at the fact no one gawked, stared, or paid any particular attention to solely her, as it unfortunately was in high school, as she made her way to the check-in booth in orientation. For a solid hour, PESHA felt a total out-of-body sensation as what seemed to be endless meet and greets took place. As a result, one of many of PESHA's personalities took over. Yet and still, bland in appearance, gloomy-eyed, awkward and nonchalant, CHATA took over whenever social norms were expected so that PESHA wouldn't have a mental breakdown. Soon enough, the small chit chat and exchange of information was over, and finally PESHA could retreat to her private quarters. Not too shabby for university housing, PESHA thought as she entered her room and began to unpack. Chapter 9 settled in. All is well thus far as PESHA embarked upon her new beginning. Although expressly focused on her studies, PESHA couldn't keep her mind from wandering, which often seemed like 100 thoughts and many separate conversations were going on at once. PESHA couldn't turn off the constant visions of murder which turned her on greatly. The voices told PESHA to kill. It was the only way to numb her pain of childhood trauma, but you must be careful and not draw attention to yourself, another of PESHA multiple personalities told her. PESHA wrestled back and forth with herself as she paced the floor, talking to herself and slamming a closed fist to her face. I can't do that now, PESHA said aloud. I only just got here. She repeated over and over as she continued to hurt herself. Multiple voices yelled inside PESHA's head. You're a freak. Nobody likes you. You're just a girly boy. Everybody hates you. Stop your whining. No girl will love you. Look at you. You're a loser. The boys will only use you for sex in secret. You're a creep. They'll kill you if you don't kill them first. The voices went on and on while PESHA squeezed her head, yelling, No! Then suddenly, a knock at the door. Chapter 10, The Visitor. PESHA stopped the pacing abruptly due to the sudden knock at her door. The voices in PESHA's mind silenced briefly as she looked up and straight ahead in confidence as CHATA took over PESHA's body. PESHA walked towards the door and opened it swiftly as she stood dazed in eerie silence. Hey, how's it going? A tall, handsome, perfectly tanned, and muscular guy said. Fine, PESHA replied. I'm Josh Camel, your next door neighbor. Just wanted to introduce myself and invite you to a little mix and mingle gathering we're having later tonight, Josh continued, in saying, No thanks. I'm not much of a social person, PESHA boldly stated, with wild eyes and a confused expression on her face. That's too bad, Josh expressed. Well, if you change your mind, here's the flyer for the meetup. Yeah, thanks, PESHA mumbled. No problem, said eager Josh, as he wandered down the hall and knocked on another door. PESHA watched curiously from her doorway until Josh was no longer in sight. PESHA had never had guys in school interested in conversation with her, so her thoughts were rampant on the matter. The voices increased yet again, taunting PESHA to go out and kill. PESHA finally convinced herself to wander about later that night and perhaps she'd run into Josh. Chapter 11, Sneaking and Creeping. The evening hour in Princeton had brung about nightfall. At only 8:30 p.m., the sky was darkened as the stars followed. The windshield was cool as it whistled through the trees. It was awfully quiet on campus until reaching the auditorium holding the mix and mingle, where laughter, chatter, and cheer could be heard echoing aloud. PESHA waited until the coast was clear and little to no traffic trampled up and down the hallway to sneak out. PESHA wandered around, inside and out, to familiarize herself with the campus. PESHA stumbled upon the mix and mingle gathering and peered from a distance at all in company, not in the least interested in joining, but anxiously to satisfy her curiosity. Pesha yearned for the thrill of a kill as she creepily watched the students in attendance. All of a sudden, Pesha heard a faint voice. "Are you going in or not?" At first, Pesha thought it was the voices, but then Josh appeared out of nowhere from the darkness. "So?" Josh said, laughing aloud. "So what?" Pesha shyly replied. "Are you going in?" Josh excitedly said. No, no. "I gotta go," Pesha blurted out as she hurried away. Pesha wandered afar to the other end of the campus and sat under a tree. Pesha then seen a glimpsed shadow or two out of her peripheral and hoped it wasn't anyone lurking up behind her. Then she noticed it was just a squirrel. Weird that it would be out at night, so she caught it, and before she knew it, Pesha had squeezed the life out of the squirrel. Pesha then proceeded to rip the tiny animal's skin off from the eyeballs. A brief, pleasurable experience in the moment. But it wasn't enough. Pesha had a thirst for human blood, but couldn't leave campus just yet to indulge in other activities. But just as Pesha was about to head back to her room, she seen none other than Josh Camel, who was stumbling drunk by now. "Oh, hey, it's you again," Josh shouted as he faded into the darkness where Pesha was standing. "Yep, sure is," Pesha mumbled as she tried to walk away when Josh grabbed her hand. "You know, you're kind of cute." Josh slurred his words as he aggressively leaned in to try to kiss Pesha. Pesha jerked her hand away and said, "Oh, really?" as she grew angry at Josh and his playboy entitled behavior. Josh said, "Oh, come on, don't be like that," as he forced a rough kiss on Pesha's lips. Pesha was furious by now and jerked away yet again. In the manliest voice, Pesha said, "How cute am I now?" as she raised up her skirt. Josh yelled, "Whoa, what the fuck, man? You're a dude? You got a dick?" The voices in Pesha's head said, "We told you they wouldn't like you." Pesha screamed, "Shut up!" Josh said, "Who the fuck are you talking to? You're crazy and a perv, huh?" Pesha said, "No, but you said I was cute." Chapter 12, Thrill Kill. Josh replied, "I lied. Now get the fuck away from me, freak." Pesha couldn't take one more insult. Her childhood flashed before her very eyes. Without hesitation, Pesha pulled out a pocket knife and slashed Josh's throat. Pesha watched in excitement while Josh's blood squirted out as he could do nothing but grab his neck and fall to the ground. Something else had taken over Pesha at this point. She licked Josh's blood from the blade, and she spoke frankly to him. "You know, Josh, you shouldn't force yourselves on girls and tease or degrade them," Trenica said, another of Pesha's personalities. Trenica pulled down Josh's pants, rolled him over, and raped his dead corpse. When Trenica was all done, she rolled Josh over yet again and cut open his stomach and watched as his intestines fell out. The entire ordeal aroused and pleased Pesha's soul. It was just the thrill kill she needed before classes started. Chapter 13, Class in Session. It was the first day of classes and lectures, and all anyone could talk about was the tragedy of Josh Camel being murdered on campus. Turns out he was due to graduate soon, as it was his last year of college. Supposedly quite the scholar he was supposed to be. Regardless, the campus was riddled with news reporters, local police, and detectives lurking around for clues and answers. Pesha, however, carried on as normal. From outer appearances, Pesha came off as quiet, shy, weird, and the isolated type. A creepier version of an overachiever geek squad type who had no social life or desire to interact with fellow peers unnecessarily. Princeton had no idea that in reality they had a severely mentally ill serial killer honor undergraduate enrolled in their prestigious college. Pesha attended all her classes faithfully and kept a very low profile. All seemed well until someone new entered Pesha's life. Chapter 14: The Dating Game. Pesha vowed to maintain control of her murderous rage while on campus, at least after such a scandal ensued over Josh Campbell's death. Pesha used her savings to buy a car, and after she obtained a driver's license and her new official identity change, she often went off campus for her evil, lustful desires. Pesha was a model student by day and a demonically possessed devil in a blue dress sex worker by night. 2 years had passed, and Pesha's routine had increased Princeton's, New Jersey's homicide rate, with a numerous of men being found deceased in various unflattering positions. It was obvious to authorities a series of sex crimes were taking place, but no leads in their investigation yielded any suspects. Nevertheless, an accidental study partner became a new relationship interest for Pesha. Hesitant at first, but finally, Pesha vaguely entertained the idea. Bradley Oliver was an undergraduate as well, and only a year older than Pesha. Bradley was very vigilant and noticed frequent strange behavior of Pesha, but figured it was just stress, so he thought nothing more about it. The relationship between the pair was only casual at first, but after a month, Pesha decided to share her secret with Bradley, seeing by now he was serious about their connection. So randomly one night, Pesha just matter-of-factly blurted out to Bradley, "Just so you know, I was born a boy, and I still have my penis, although I identify as a woman." Bradley was shocked initially, but after a brief gasp and sigh over the matter and goofy little laugh, Bradley finally said, "You're just playing, right?" Pesha, with a serious mug on her face and a firm tone, replied, "I don't play around. I'm not lying." Pesha then sat, waiting for the outrage and insults, but calmly, Bradley said, "Well, let me see." Kinda surprised, Pesha agreed and lifted up her skirt. Bradley only said, "Wow, okay." After a few moments of awkward silence, Bradley confessed he still liked Pesha. Pesha herself wasn't expecting such a reply, so she went along with the idea of them dating, but the voices in Pesha's head was telling her Bradley was lying. That night, Bradley and Pesha had sex for the first time, but afterwards, Bradley asked Pesha never to tell anyone about them. Typical, he didn't want anyone knowing he was gay. Pesha figured as much, as she hated all of the tricks she had before, requesting the same discretion. However, Pesha complied, and things were fine for a while until Bradley found himself a real girlfriend and started ignoring Pesha. for his other outgoing, seemingly normal friends. This enraged Pesha severely. The voices became louder as Pesha had a mental breakdown in her room. He used you like all the others, the voices repeated over and over again. He never liked you. He wanted a real woman all along. Kill him, kill him, kill him. The voices grew louder and louder as Pesha pulled her hair out until her scalp bled. This isn't over. I'll tell him when it's over, Pesha thought aloud. She called Bradley over and over again with no answer, which infuriated her even more and more. Chapter 15. Nobody uses Pesha. Saturday night, Pesha waited anxiously for Bradley and his new girlfriend Diane Moore to leave campus so that she could follow them. As Pesha waited in her car, her anger turned into fury. Finally, Bradley and Little Miss Diane exited the doors and casually walked towards the campus student parking lot. Pesha could barely contain her rage, but she didn't want another massacre on campus, so she stuck to the plan and began following the couple to their next destination. Who knew the drive would be more than an hour away, but it seems Bradley made plans for them in New York. Bradley pulled up at an expensive hotel he had made dinner and room reservations at, as Pesha waited from a distance. Pesha's murderous rage was unbearable at this point as she began to shake uncontrollably. Bradley had never done such a thing for Pesha, and this pissed her off profusely. Pesha waited until the happy wanderers walked into the hotel before following in behind them. She peered at them through the glass window as they sat down to dine. Pesha then went inside and sat at the bar for a drink or two, and later followed the couple to the floor of their suite. Upon entry, Pesha appeared out of nowhere and forced her way into the room with the startled couple. Diane couldn't mumble a word, but Bradley raised his voice in anger as he reached out to shield Diane. "What the fuck are you doing here, Pesha?" he demanded to know, while he and Diane both slowly backed away just as Pesha walked towards them with a gun. Pesha's eyes were wild and as wide as an owl, while she held a firm grip on her gun pointed directly at Bradley and Diane. Pesha never even blinked one eye as she simply said, "Nobody uses Pesha." Diane began to cry, and Bradley just begged for forgiveness, but Pesha replied, "It's too late for that now." Pesha forced Bradley to hog-tie Diane with rope from her kill kit bag. He followed instructions without hesitation, yet and still begging for the both of their lives. "Shut up!" Pesha yelled. "Now undress her and yourself," Pesha ordered. "Wait, what?" Bradley said. "Just do it now," Pesha demanded again. Bradley did what he was told, thinking Pesha was just going to humiliate them, but Pesha had something more sinister in mind. Once the couple was naked, Pesha made Bradley lay on the bed naked, with hog-tied Diane in between his legs. Pesha then forced Diane to perform fellatio on Bradley while she watched and held them both at gunpoint. Pesha paced the room, talking to herself, and then suddenly she grabbed a pillow and shot Diane in the head through the pillow to muffle the sound. Blood splattered all over Bradley, and Diane lay dead between Bradley's legs with his penis still in her mouth. When Bradley attempted to scream for help, Pesha hit Bradley in the face with the butt of her gun. She continued to beat Bradley with her gun and then the hotel lamp and finally a hammer she had in her kill kit bag. Soon enough, Bradley was unrecognizable. PESHA was covered in Bradley's blood and laughed hysterically when the deed was done, which turned her on and pleased her hidden demons greatly. PESHA then masturbated and showered after, before calmly leaving the room as if nothing had happened. PESHA exited the hotel through a rear door into the parking garage, then made the hour-and-a-half drive back to Princeton, New Jersey, to the college campus. Chapter 16, Putting on an Act. With now 3 Princeton students murdered, PESHA vowed to maintain control of her erratic behavior, at least on campus, that is. After the impromptu trip to New York, however, PESHA was intrigued by the busy strip and all of its glistening lights, and in that moment she knew she had found her new hunting ground. Before long, just as in New Jersey, soon enough, New York as well had several unsolved sex crimes, motivated murders, without a clue or suspect in mind. Things carried on as usual for another 2 years. Finally, PESHA was due to receive her bachelor's degree in science and biology after 4 long years in total. Soon after graduation, PESHA was employed in New York at the Rockefeller Research Institute and later transferred to the California Research Institute, where her secret double life continued for a number of years until the murders started being linked together. Chapter 17, Staying Ahead of the Game. By now, PESHA was one of the most prolific serial killers that ever was, murdering a total of 8 people in her younger school-age years, 3 people during college, and more than 40 random victims while on the stroll prostituting in New Jersey, New York, and California. Not to mention all the poor defenseless animals PESHA killed as well. PESHA's crimes consisted of animal cruelty, torture, mutilation and killing, necrophilia. She was a sexual sadist serial killer and a family annihilator. But PESHA's disabilities were just as disturbing, which also included self-injury disorder, narcissistic personality disorder, socio-psychopathic disorder, dissociative identity disorder with more than 5 active personalities of their own, schizophrenia, and bipolar disorder, which is nothing short of amazing because PESHA was smart enough with a very high IQ to have obtained a bachelor's degree and to fool everyone around her. However, PESHA was tired of moving around, but she had the wildest idea to apply for employment with the FBI as a scientist specialist, with the intentions in mind to find out what the Federal Bureau of Investigation knew pertaining to the murders as reports were being made. On the news about the open cases and their eerie connections and similarities with each other. Chapter 18, On the Road Again. PESHA had done the unimaginable and actually accomplished the unthinkable, as she indeed gained employment and trained for quite some time with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. She was now in the process of traveling to her new home, Sin City, Las Vegas, Nevada, which she never fathomed would be her final destination. PESHA was assigned to the FBI field office in Las Vegas, Nevada, which is where she was due to report the following week. It was only Friday, and the road trip would only take her 5 hours and 45 minutes to complete, which gave her the entire weekend to explore and settle in. Much like every other state, PESHA had The pleasure of residing in Las Vegas was sure to bring about new thrills to feed the darkness within. Upon Pesha's arrival, she checked into a hotel until her housing accommodations were available, eager for nightfall to arrive so she could go out on the prowl in a camouflage disguise. But in the meantime, Pesha followed up on the progress of the ongoing investigation, which had recently been taken over by the federal authorities. Connections were made in all of the murders from 3 different states because of the Hebrew letter Shin with the sin dot symbolism being left behind at all of the crime scenes by Pesha, which was her signature calling card. What a shock it'll be for the Las Vegas local authorities to realize the Sin Transgression serial killer had reached none other than Sin City. CHATA PESHA felt she was surely home at last. Although not much of a gambler with money, Pesha was eagerly craving some excitement, and where better to find willfully careless and reckless ignorant victims than the casino. So Pesha waited until early evening hour to check in at Wynn Resort Casino Hotel, one of the biggest bad and bougie hotel casino resorts in Las Vegas, for the entire weekend. Pesha booked the most luxurious suite with the greatest lavish amenities in the Wynn Fairway Villa for her stay. The Sin Transgression serial killer's grand entrance was bound to be epic, leaving her infamous signature calling card behind every step of the way. Chapter 19. Let the games begin. Pesha settled comfortably in her suite and took advantage of the fully stocked wet bar while carefully contemplating her affairs for the evening. Room service and a personal butler came in handy as she pampered and spoiled herself with scrumptious gourmet sweets, treats, appetizers, and a personal massage in the suite's massage room. Pesha, whom had checked in with one of her many aliases, Tranica Breadlove, readied herself for the night's adventures. She dressed in her finest yet provocative attire, then set out to explore the casino resort's entertainment. Tranica mixed and mingled as she so graciously blended in with all the other overly anxious patrons. It's amazing just how much a little cleavage and a crossed silky smooth leg exposed by the long split on a lady's dress can draw so much attention to a single woman sitting alone. However, Pesha, whom is currently in her alter ego multiple personality alias Tranica, noticed there were plenty of other ladies of the night, working girls, all scattered about the hotel resorts. This night should definitely be fun, Tranica thought, as she sat at the slot machine sipping her alcoholic beverage. Chapter 20. Party, 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 let's all get wasted. Tranica went about her business and waited patiently. See, a lady, nor a pro-ho, never throw themselves at a trick. You let them sniff you out like a hound dog. Then you draw them in like flies to shit. It wasn't long before the first drunken sailor came along, flaunting his stuff and sporting a shining wedding band. But the two-timing bastard was offering a whole lot of money for a good time before his wife came back from her girls' trips with her friends. The guy must have been pretty lonely or either desperate, because his offer went from $6,000 to $15,000 before the end of the conversation. How could Tranica refuse? So she told the John her rules. The key to not being busted for soliciting in public places is to have a date with dinner or perhaps drinks, and then meet separately for prying eyes that may be watching. Which the pair of them did just that. After casual conversation and a couple of drinks at the bar, the two left separately and met at Trenika's room. Trenica tried warning the gentleman that she may not have all the parts he was expecting, but the guy was so white boy wasted and wanted it from the back anyway that it didn't even matter to him none. Poor guy only lasted 15 minutes anyway, but 15,000 for 15 minutes was worth every damn minute. Ain't nothing like a guy that don't waste much of your time and gets straight to the point, Trenica thought. He had no idea he had just went around the world with a transgender serial killer. But since the night was still young, Trenica let the clueless guy live a little. He got dressed and left the room even happier than he came. Chapter 21. Pimping Ain't Easy. Trenica refreshed herself over a few more shots before leaving her room again. But upon her exit, much to her surprise, stood a stylishly dressed, muscular man at her door. "May I help you?" Trenica asked in an agitated tone. "Yeah, I think you can, Miss Thang," replied the not so kind man. "And who the hell are you?" Trenica quickly responded. The guy laughed. "I'm Daniel, but the question is, who the hell are you?" he aggressively explained. Before Trenica could answer, Daniel continued in saying, "See, I've seen it all. And yes, you are definitely good at what you do, but you playing with Daniel's money now, baby, and stepping on my girl's toes out there." Daniel then showed his gun on his waist and forced Trenica to go with him for a talk in private. In the moment, Trenica had no other choice but to go along with Daniel's orders. Once in his suite, Daniel demanded half of what Trenica had just made, and he also ordered her to work for him from now on. Trenica thought this Daniel guy would never shut up, but he was so high on cocaine he just couldn't stop running his damn mouth. Finally, he forced Trenica to take off her clothes. He was going to force himself on her until he noticed she had a penis, and he bust out laughing, saying, "Oh shit, so you a dude, huh?" In that moment, Trenica, aka PESHA's childhood was triggered all over again, and Daniel had no idea what was coming or who he was actually dealing with. In all of his arrogant gloating, when Daniel turned his back to Trenica, she grabbed a knife off the bar and stabbed Daniel repeatedly. Once Daniel fell to the ground, reaching for his gun, Trenica slit his throat from ear to ear, chopped off his penis, and split Daniel's open from his asshole to his navel. Trenica's naked body was drenched in Daniel's blood. She lit a cigarette, snorted a line of coke, had herself a few shots, and went to shower in Daniel's bathroom. When Trenica was done, she redressed, grabbed $500,000 and a couple pounds of cocaine in a duffel bag, left the sin symbol in blood, then politely left Daniel's suite when the coast was clear. Chapter 22. On to the next. Trenica made a brief stop by her suite to put away her goodies, and as if it were nothing, she proceeded to enjoy the rest of her evening. From the casino floor to the bar to the nightclubs, as well as many other popular attractions, Trenica met several interesting characters. By Saturday night's end, Trenica had left her unsavory mark with a few other patrons, although she staged it to look like unfortunate overdose victims instead of a gruesome scene. Nevertheless, by Sunday, she was ready to do it all over again. Chapter 23. Time flies when you're having fun. Sleeping in is one of the many joys of vacationing, and Trinica enjoyed every relaxing minute of it. Momentarily free from the voices in her head saying awful things, Trinica enjoyed a late brunch on the patio's balcony. Curious to what entertaining amusement would occupy her day, Trinica researched what performances would be live at and in the surrounding area of the casino resort she could attend. With such a viciously lavish Saturday, Trinica figured she indulged in a few activities elsewhere as to not draw suspicion. Although casinos don't like losing money or disturbing their guests, it's rather hard to hide a murder and several other unexplained deaths, with authorities being alerted and drawing attention to the issues. By securing certain areas to block guests from entering the crime scene, guests were already whispering about what was going on, so Trinica made plans out on the town for later that night, ready to fulfill her bloodthirsty appetite before she started work the following morning.
Chapter 24. Breaking news. The day was fabulous, yet boring. Trinica couldn't wait any longer to cure her craving. Sunday night. Trinica went on a stroll to find her next victim. So many lights and even more traffic of tipsy individuals looking for a good time. The interesting thing about Sin City is everybody's looking for something, which means there's a lot of people who is real carefree and friendly, especially when they're under the influence, making it all the more easier to get anybody to go along with anything you want to do. With this in mind, Trinica took full advantage of the present opportunity to fulfill her murderous adventure. There were three types of men Trinica was in search of: the loose, overly friendly, careless, reckless drunk, the smooth-talking jerk on the prowl, and the abusive, overly aggressive asshole who thinks he can take whatever he wants. Those individuals were Trinica's targets of choice, and she was ready, set, go, with her kill kit in tow. The first unlucky victim of the night was a guy cruising by looking for hookers. He stopped Trinica while walking down the street and all but begged her to join him in some fun with him. Trinica and her passionate trick went for a ride, getting high all along the way. But when Trinica told the guy to pull over behind the building to get down to business, come to find out, Loverboy didn't have a dime to offer and thought by bluffing he could get a freebie. This angered Trinica, that this creep would try to play her, and before she knew it, Trinica snapped, grabbed a blade from her bag, and rammed it straight through the unsuspecting guy's forehead, right between the eyes. His body went into convulsions as blood trickled down his face. Trinica sat back and watched the life fade away from his eyes. Before exiting the car, Trinica left her calling card in blood on the windshield. Then she disappeared into the night to engage in more fun. Trinica's mental state was dwindling fast as the drugs, alcohol, and mental illness clashed. So much so, before long, Trinica was bouncing between personalities with every person she encountered through the night. CHATA, PESHA, and even her street alias Jazzy all made an impromptu appearance randomly. By night's end, all four entities had taken the lives of 5 people in total, whose deaths ranged from various levels of violence, such as stabbings, asphyxiation, castration, mutilation, disembowelment, and necrophilia. Wickedly satisfied, creeping upon the wee hours of the morning, Trenica made her way back to her hotel suite to recuperate. No sooner than Trenica made it back to her room, she turned on the TV while she undressed, and what did she hear? None other than breaking news alerting citizens of a mass serial killer who was on the loose, and recent reports suggested that crimes had reached all the way to Las Vegas, Nevada. Now cases linked from 4 different states, totaling 54 known victims. A massive manhunt was underway for the most notorious serial killer of modern day time, dubbed the Sin Transgression serial killer. Trenica talked to herself while laughing hysterically aloud. They have no idea just how close they are with the name they gave PESHA, nor were they aware just how close PESHA was to them while they run in circles. Not to mention, the authorities don't have a clue about the other 8 victims from PESHA's childhood, which were her first kills that led her down this endless rabbit hole of doom. Chapter 25. In the Face of Danger. Monday morning. Rested and dressed to impress, PESHA's quick change in appearance and attitude had shifted yet again. Up and about bright and early for her first day to work at a new job. Checkout was successful and nobody suspected a thing. Now only minutes away from the beginning to an end, 9 a.m. PESHA arrives at the FBI field office in Las Vegas, Nevada. The smart yet quiet and shy persona had taken over as she checked in for duty. With so much going on, not many people paid close attention to PESHA, so she was easily able to blend in and proceed with her daily assignments. As a scientist for the FBI, PESHA's main responsibility consisted of laboratory work, amongst other important duties, conducting research for her department. While staying focused on many tasks given, PESHA paid close attention to all the incoming information and evidence collected pertaining to the biggest case the FBI was working on at the moment, concerning their hunt for a serial killer. The media plagued with the name Sin Transgression serial killer. Because of the sin symbol, the killer left at the crime scenes. The matter was so urgent, the FBI director in Washington, D.C. found it necessary to send profiling agents from the FBI headquarters to assist with the high-profile case. The Las Vegas field office was expecting the profilers to travel to them and arrive by the following day. PESHA just politely kept her head down and stayed busy and acted as normal as possible, considering her awkward mannerisms and personalities she couldn't really change. By the end of the workday, PESHA didn't stay or linger. She left promptly to avoid small talk or interaction with others. After a seemingly successful first day, PESHA eagerly met with the property owner of her new home to obtain her keys and begin moving in. With such heavy police and federal presence around town, PESHA decided it would be best to play things safe and lay low for a while locally on her murderous spree. So after settling in her new home comfortably, PESHA began to hatch a plan plan to take short-distance trips to other cities surrounding Nevada to continue to fulfill her thrills, as well as to keep the federal authorities guessing about when or where the next murder would take place. No matter the obvious dangers, PESHA couldn't contain her urges. She was addicted to killing, as it was her medicine, her cure, to numb her own pain and put ease to her multiple personalities that controlled her mind and body. The voices relentlessly told PESHA to do awful, horrendous things, and when she didn't comply, the voices got louder and louder as they tormented her daily. PESHA conducted her work responsibilities to the best of her ability, but some co-workers became curious to PESHA's oddities and her vague, nonchalant, and quiet nature. But just like back in college, PESHA found a way to manage without overly indulging or inserting herself in needless communication. The profiling special agents had arrived and begun their work to manifest an accurate profile of the unsub to deliver to the media and local police. Chapter 26, On the Hunt Again. PESHA's first off day had arrived since working her new job. She had the whole day planned with anticipation to take a day trip to the city of Sunrise Manor, Nevada. Only a 16-minute travel distance, but away from the area of previous murders and PESHA's residence. PESHA was on the prowl, a mission to find her next unsuspecting victim. A night on the town is just what PESHA felt she needed, so she found a crowded bar and grill to engage a new unlucky companion to spend the night with. It wasn't long before a tipsy yet generous gentleman caller struck up a conversation with her. After several drinks laced by PESHA and a few appetizers, the pair of them left together. Danny staggered along while being held up, assisted in walking by PESHA, who eagerly helped Danny to his car, located in a parking garage. Once inside, Danny wasted no time making a move on PESHA, but by now, Danny could barely hold his own head up. He slurred his words, and unfortunately, when he leaned in to kiss PESHA, he vomited everywhere, which enraged PESHA severely. Fury in her eyes and cold blood running through her veins, PESHA snapped. She took a taser from her purse and shocked Danny with it repeatedly, over and over again, until he passed out unconscious. PESHA wanted to take her time with this victim while she mutilated his body. PESHA cut off Danny's eyelids and split the cracks of his mouth on both sides. She carved the Hebrew symbolism letters for sin and transgression in his chest and cut his penis in half. Lastly, PESHA masturbated to the dead, bloody corpse, which turned her on profusely. Then she exited Danny's vehicle as if nothing was wrong at all, highly satisfied and pleased with her work. On the way back home, PESHA decided to stop for a treat. Ice cream was what she was rewarded with as a kid after her father and uncle had their way with her sexually. What better way to relive the past? On the short distance drive back home, PESHA heard the police dispatched to the crime scene on her police scanner in her car. By the time the nightly news aired, it was the top story of breaking news. Chapter 27, The sin transgression killer struck again. All across every major headline, the serial killer strikes again. PESHA sat back and watched in amazement while eating popcorn. Mentally disturbed PESHA found the whole ordeal amusing as the FBI agents delivered their profile live on TV. Special Agent Connor was the lead and spokesperson who reported the unsub is a deranged serial killer who is likely mentally ill. The unsub is possibly undiagnosed or off medication, which is triggering psychotic breaks within the unsub. He continued in saying the overly sexual nature of the victims suggests the unsub is a middle-aged male who is struggling with his sexuality and likely endured childhood trauma himself, resulting in sexual and physical abuse. Special Agent Connor continued in saying that the unsub may be attractive, clean-cut, which also makes him come off as less threatening. He may even appear to be shy and soft-spoken. And lastly, because of the vast range of the unsub's crimes, he is likely wealthy or at least very financially secure with a good, high-paying job that he may also travel for. It was so unsettling because the FBI had basically just described any middle-class to upper-class businessman. Citizens of Las Vegas and surrounding areas were likely to be afraid of their own bosses or any professional-looking man they encountered. PESHA, however, grew angry listening to the news broadcast talk about her in such a way. And how dare they call her a man, she thought. PESHA paced the floor while trying to beat the voices out of her own head. Before she knew it, something evil came over her, and she destroyed her entire house in a blind rage. Chapter 28. A hectic day at the office. PESHA awakened with conflicted emotions. She couldn't miss work, but her mental instability was unpredictable. Regardless, she readied herself for the day and made her way to the field office. Upon PESHA's arrival to the office, she witnessed the frantic circus that was going on. People were in and out all day, and the special agents were at the latest crime scenes interviewing potential witnesses. As they retraced the victim's steps, PESHA tried to act as normal as she possibly could, yet she found herself quite anxious. FBI's physical scientists were expecting new evidence to come in that needed to be analyzed as soon as possible. Panic set in as PESHA relived the details of the murder in her head over and over again. She was sure she didn't leave any fingerprints or make any careless mistakes, but overwhelming voices in her head wouldn't cease as she desperately tried to work. PESHA overheard agents speaking about waiting on surveillance to arrive, but much to their surprise, the bar the victim was last seen in cameras wasn't working at the time. So as of now, authorities had no idea if the victim was alone or left with someone. However, PESHA was on the edge throughout the day as FBI scrambled for leads, clues, or something they could go on, a smoking gun even, in the case. End of the 10-hour workday couldn't have come any sooner, PESHA thought. PESHA was dying to get out of that office as soon as she possibly could. Any sane person would go home and relax the rest of the night, but clearly PESHA wasn't in her right mind. Once in her car, PESHA let out a out and screamed to the top of her lungs obscure obscenities. PESHA's delusional rant lasted her entire drive home. Before long, that unbearable urge emerged within PESHA, the desire to kill and inflict the pain on someone else like she felt inside. Chapter 29, back at it again. PESHA couldn't think rationally, but she tried to resist the urges she felt by hurting herself. PESHA banged her head against the wall, but when that wasn't enough to stop the voices, grabbed a curling iron while hot and inserted it inside her rectum. Screaming in painful agony, PESHA didn't stop there and proceeded to cut herself on her inner thigh. She sat in her loneliness and cried while watching her own blood trickle down her legs. When PESHA stopped feeling sorry for herself, CHATA took over her body, patched herself up, changed clothes, grabbed her kill kit bag, hopped in the car, and took a trip 20 minutes away to a city called Spring Valley. Once there, PESHA didn't want to take any chances in major public places, so she drove around a while to a more shadier side of town in search for drugs. PESHA ran across a few homeless people and fiends on the street, whom she asked to point her in the direction of where she could find some pain pills and meth. Of course, for a small fee, they were happily obliged to do so for her. In fact, a prostitute injected herself in the conversation when she seen PESHA had money and offered to make a call for her. PESHA agreed, and the girl said the dealer would meet her at the gas station next to the alley that they were currently at. Surely enough, about 15 minutes later, a guy in a black SUV pulled up. He signaled for PESHA to follow him out of sight of the main street and prying eyes passing by. Once in the alley, PESHA got out of her car and hopped into the dealer's SUV. A deal was struck for what PESHA was looking for, and she proceeded to reach down in her purse for her money. Only when she did, the cocky drug dealer, who was obviously feeling himself, thought he would flirt and try to make a move on a little white girl with money he figured he could easily take advantage of. The dealer grabbed PESHA's ass and mumbled, "Yeah, I could use someone like you working for me." This guy obviously had no idea who he was dealing with. Then all of a sudden, PESHA flipped. She pepper sprayed the drug dealer, and when he went to reach for his gun, PESHA tased him in the nuts. Suddenly, PESHA decided to change her MO and shot the dealer multiple times. But her plan was to stage the scene as a drug deal gone bad. PESHA had never killed a black man before that night. PESHA shot the dealer 3 times in his head, chest, and penis. PESHA also decided not to leave her infamous calling card, the Hebrew letters for sin, transgression. PESHA took the dealer's drugs, gun, and money, wiped her prints from the SUV, and hurried out up there before any street people realized what happened. PESHA jumped in her as well as no sexual undertone to the crime. Perhaps they'll think it's a copycat or a partner attack in some way. She thought. Either way, PESHA was hoping the murder would change the Fed's profile of her. But in reality, PESHA couldn't predict nor expect what would happen next. It was the following day, before anybody knew of the most recent murder, which the police in Spring Valley handled recklessly, thinking the incident was just another drug gang-related crime. But when finally the news broke, the feds were in hot pursuit to contain and preserve any evidence they could. PESHA was at work, still geeked up from the night before, when news of the crime swept through the field office. Then, without warning, everyone was shocked in amazement watching the local news at the crime scene interviewing witnesses live on TV. Several homeless people and a prostitute that went by the name of Candy all reported on live TV that they seen a clean-cut woman who was looking for drugs with the drug dealer last in the alley around midnight. They all claimed the woman was white with reddish brown hair. The public was in a panic about a serial killer or multiple serial killers being on the loose. Local police were confused and alarmed, and the FBI was furious they hadn't caught the killer yet. Although the most recent crime wasn't anything like the other murderers, special agents were sure that this victim had a connection to the others. Now the FBI were being questioned about whether they had made a mistake in identification of the unsuspect. The FBI released a statement about the matter, saying that their profiles stood as they reported, but added that the killer could be working with a female cover or partner, or perhaps the unsub is one person, which is a male that dressed like a woman. PESHA was angry all over again. The FBI made the comments that they made, as well as she was severely pissed off about the witnesses coming forward. PESHA literally wanted to go back and massacre them all, but she needed to stay focused and make it through the day. PESHA knew soon enough she was going to have to make a major move. Chapter 31. Too close for comfort. The authorities were getting way too close to solving their case, and PESHA's life would be over for sure before she knew it if she didn't do something drastic and make a smooth getaway. She knew the feds were trained to shoot to kill on sight. PESHA would be facing the death penalty if apprehended anyway. Nevertheless, PESHA wasn't quite finished with Sin City yet. Over the next couple of days, 2 more murders occurred, one in Henderson, Nevada, and the other in Boulder City, Nevada. PESHA was ascending the FBI on a wild goose chase, and the director of FBI and others high up in power within Washington, D.C. was mad as hell, demanding an end be put to the slaughters taking place all over Nevada. One evening, a meeting took place with all the special agents working on the case when a significant discovery was made. It was suggested that Einstein was way too good with avoiding authorities and always seemed to be one step ahead, as if he had detailed information regarding the investigations, not to mention the vast number and body count of victims. In conclusion, it was determined the unsub may work for the government or even be one of their own. While the FBI worked their new angle, PESHA was masterminding her own twisted angle as well. Chapter 32. Time was running out. PESHA managed to keep her attitude under control, but her patience was running dangerously thin as the special agents slowly but surely began to put all the pieces to a mass murderous puzzle together. With the knowledge of new information coming in and the theory that the unsub may be a government official, different measures were taken to try to identify the unsub, who was now being seen as a traitor. Interestingly enough, while on a break, a fellow co-worker who was particularly chatty decided to engage PESHA in curious conversation. Usually PESHA was rather quiet and only spoke when being spoken to. Everyone just assumed PESHA was shy and the introverted type. But on this day, another scientist was all too eager to discuss the high-profile case, but who wasn't? Gabriella said that the special agents were going back over all the evidence of every crime to trace the unsub steps. PESHA simply replied, "Oh, really?" Gabriella continued in saying, "It seems the killing started in New Jersey. Then suddenly she broke from her previous statements to say, hey, you know what? Didn't you attend Princeton University around that time?" PESHA was startled by Gabriella's connection, but answered quickly, "Yes, I did." Gabriella then said, "Well, did you hear about any of the murders happening back then?" PESHA was slow to answer this time, carefully deciding her wording, so she lied when replying by saying, "Well, I was quite busy during that time with my studies, and I'm not particularly social, so I honestly didn't hear anything about murders." Gabriella responded in saying, "Well, I understand that. It's just awfully fascinating you were in the same place it all started." PESHA said, "Yeah, that is a scary thought, huh? But I'm from a small town and wasn't aware that kind of thing went on." Gabriella said, "Yeah, I get that too," while finishing her salad before departing from the break room. PESHA was basically sweating bullets, and her thoughts were running rampant. Luckily, PESHA wore a wig the night she was spotted by the witnesses. The special agents were looking for someone with reddish-brown hair. PESHA's natural hair was blonde, so perhaps bought her a little time evading the authorities. Things weren't looking good, PESHA thought. If Gabriella could make that simple connection, then it wouldn't be long before the special agents did as well. The end of day couldn't come any sooner. PESHA hurried out of there as fast as she possibly could, ready to make her next major move. Chapter 33, The Thrill of the Kill. PESHA was packed and prepared for movement. After work, instead of going home, she took her a little road trip on yet another adventure, this time further away from Las Vegas. Para, which was an hour away, was PESHA's next murderous destination. Upon her arrival, PESHA visited a park campsite to use the public restrooms to change into her disguise. PESHA put on a black wig, a black leather miniskirt, and a hot pink halter top with hot pink heels, ready for her night on the town. PESHA exited the restroom en route back to her car when she was approached by a man, desperately trying to get her attention. PESHA tried doing the guy a favor by ignoring him, but he was eerily persistent. Finally, PESHA acknowledged the guy's existence since she realized he was following her to her car. The stranger introduced himself as Jerry Davenport, and the longer he rambled on, it was apparent he was interested in getting PESHA's phone number to hang out with her later, as he put it. PESHA, however, ignored his request to exchange phone numbers, but since he seemed her for drinks, which he happily obliged. Plans were made for the pair to meet at a bar in half an hour, which Jerry agreed. Not wanting them to be seen together, Pesha suggested they take separate vehicles. At the end of the brief conversation, the two went about their separate ways. Pesha proceeded to the bar and waited for Jerry to arrive. With her kill kit tucked inside her purse, promptly, Jerry pulled into the parking lot. But when he arrived, drinks definitely wasn't on his mind. When he casually asked Pesha, could they just skip the bar and maybe get a hotel room instead? That figures, Pesha thought, just like a horny old man. Can't even buy a girl a drink, but in a rush to get in her pants. Sure, why not, Pesha said. I got plenty of party favors in my car anyway. Eyes bucked in surprise, and Jerry said, well, all right then, follow me. The hotel was only down the street, and apparently sneaky Jerry had already had a room. He had the key already without checking in. Pesha couldn't stand ego-driven jerks like Jerry, which in her mind made him the perfect target. Pesha followed Jerry into the hotel room, but he wanted to freshen up and made a dash for the bathroom while Pesha had a few shots of liquor while she waited. Not in the mood for wasting much more time, Pesha waited outside the bathroom door. When Jerry opened it, Pesha gunned him with a large 12-inch military stainless steel fixed blade knife. Jerry, shocked, stumbled backwards into the bathroom and fell in the tub, where Pesha stabbed him more than 30 times in a blind rage. Now aroused by the harrowing encounter, Pesha sodomized Jerry and masturbated while drenched in Jerry's blood from head to toe. She even stayed a while to savor the moment. Pesha indulged in excessive alcohol and a cocaine meth cocktail while interacting with her multiple personalities. By nightfall, Pesha cleaned herself up, removed all of her DNA from objects in the room, changed her clothes, and left poor butchered Jerry all alone in a pool of his own blood. Bet he thinks twice about putting a fast and loose stick or hooking up with strangers the next time, Pesha thought aloud. Oh, but there won't be a next time, she said, while laughing aloud as she walked out the door. Chapter 34. The thrill is gone. On the hour drive home, Pesha felt satisfied yet empty inside. It seems the only time Pesha felt alive or temporarily happy was when she was killing. But afterwards, a lonely dose of unfulfillment fell over her. Suppose Pesha would never be able to fill the void or pain she felt inside. Pesha was numb of sympathy or empathy or even remorse for the carnage she caused. But the more blood she shed, the intensity of the thrill made her want to kill time and time again. It was a forbidden desire that Pesha couldn't resist, which is why she enacted a plan to continue her murderous madness. Work became overwhelmingly hectic. Perhaps it was a bad idea to gain employment with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, Pesha thought, but it was too late for that. However, it did keep her one step had reached FBI's top 10 most wanted list, ranking at number 1. Multiple government agencies were now looking into the apprehension of the unsub by any means necessary. Even the military was on high alert. An update was released stating that the unsub is traveling from city to city to commit murders in an effort to throw officials off, but is believed to reside in the Las Vegas area. However, until the unsub is identified, he is still a flight risk. An advisory was also issued for everyone to be on the lookout for a professionally dressed businessman driving a nice vehicle, possibly in the company of a woman, attractive, slim, and with reddish brown hair, as well as a cross-dresser with the same traits. Chapter 35, Mistaken Identity. PESHA had made it just barely through yet another work week and was excited to get the day off. Resting or relaxing wasn't in PESHA's schedule of social activities. It was time to venture on yet another trip, only this time PESHA was driving 10 hours away to Paradise, Nevada. With a city by the name of Paradise, surely this would be an amazing experience, so PESHA thought. Along the way, PESHA made a couple of rest stops, which would later be proven to be a fatal mistake. It was during one of those rest stops that completely ruined PESHA's day. She only stopped for gas, snacks, a coffee, and a restroom break. When shit hit the fan, the lady noticed PESHA standing up to urinate through the crack in the stall door. Before PESHA knew it, the lady was screaming to the top of her lungs. She ran out the restroom, through the store, yelling, "The killer is in the bathroom! I seen him! He's in the bathroom! Call the police!" PESHA was beyond pissed. Her mind and thoughts were moving a mile a minute, racking her brain on what to do next. She was trapped in the bathroom, and she knew once she walked out, everyone would be looking directly at her. PESHA slammed her closed fist upside her head as the voices grew louder and louder, clouding her judgment. Then another personality took over as PESHA broke down. CHATA, being the more socially inclined personality, took over PESHA like a possession and walked out the restroom in confidence with her head held high. "That's her! Him! Whatever it is," the old woman shouted. "Hold it right there. Don't you move, bastard," a muscular man boldly demanded. "The cops are on their way, and you ain't going nowhere," he said. The store clerk was frantically on the phone with the police. "Listen, guys, there has been some kind of mistake," CHATA frantically said. "I work for the FBI, so I couldn't be the killer," CHATA explained while flashing her federal identification, which the big bulky guy snatched from her to view more closely. "Well, I'll be damned, she's right," the Billy Badass guy said as he turned his frustration towards the nosy little old lady. "I don't care. I seen Miss Thing peeing standing up," the lady said. CHATA inserted feds will be all over this lead and they will know it was her there. Pesha was frantic, trying to think of what to do next. The FBI was sure to interrogate her if and when she went back to work. Pesha couldn't control her anger. All she could think about was killing that little old lady as Pesha circled back to the store, waited across the street for the little old lady to leave. When she did, Pesha followed her onto the service road alongside the highway. After traveling for some distance, Pesha rammed her vehicle into the back of the old lady until she ran off the road and crashed into a steep ditch. Pesha watched as the little old lady's car blew up in flames. "You should have minded your own business, old bitch," Pesha yelled as she sped by on down the road. Pesha immediately got back on the highway and proceeded with her trip to Paradise, which was still 6 hours away. Chapter 36, On the Run Again. A full police report about the incident at the gas station was made, which local authorities alerted the FBI, whom took the matter much more seriously. When they realized Pesha had been identified as the possible answer, a full investigation was done looking into her background. When the FBI learned that in fact Pesha was transgendered and legally changed her sexual identity and a portion of her birth name, they knew that Pesha possibly could be the answer, and perhaps this wasn't the case of mistaken identity. Special agents tracked and traced all records on Pesha and had begun to rebuild their profile. Before long, the FBI discovered that everywhere Pesha resided for school or work is where the murders took place. Even looking into Pesha's childhood, it was unearthed her mother, father, uncle, several students, and the uncle's girlfriend mysteriously died before Pesha left. Slowly but surely, the horror surrounding Pesha began to unfold. Unanswered urgent calls were made to Pesha to report to work in an effort not to alert her that anything was wrong, but after failed attempts, the special agents feared Pesha was on the run. An APB was immediately put out for Pesha, and a warrant was obtained to search her home. A manhunt was underway for Pesha, but what authorities found in her home was startling. Pesha kept a very detailed diary about all her murderous crimes. Video recordings were found of Pesha hurting herself and talking to herself as well, clearly embodying different personalities altogether. The Hebrew letters and symbolism for sin and transgression was painted on Pesha's walls in blood and organized. Different kill kits with various weapons and torture tools were found in an organized closet full of labeled items for work as well as items for other people with names Pesha, CHATA, Trenica, Jazzy, Tara, Lacey, Paul, and Shelley were all Pesha's multiple personalities. It was overwhelmingly clear to investigators that Pesha was severely mentally ill, obviously unable to control her murderous crimes, which stemmed from her childhood. That's undoubtedly her trigger from trauma she endured. Regardless, agents worked tirelessly to get Pesha off the streets as she was a danger to herself and others. Pesha knew she couldn't return to Las Vegas now, so she was on the run yet again after finding out the FBI was on to her and had searched her home. Pesha kept up with the movement of all the officials trying to track her down on her scanner in her car, which she could hear all dispatched calls. Pesha made it to Paradise, Nevada, where she quickly altered her identity again, Only this time, Pesha did what she hated and reverted back to her male appearance, since everyone was on the lookout for a transgender woman. Pesha taped her breasts down, cut her hair, and dressed as a man would. Pesha also ditched her car and rented a vehicle using a male alias she had been waiting to use for such a time like the present. Although the danger level was high, Pesha, who was now going by Paul, just couldn't resist a little fun before he fled the state for good. So Pesha went to the gay club for the very first time in his life. It was actually quite the experience for him, and very welcoming, Paul thought. He had no problem blending in the overcrowded club. Playing his role as a bottom, Paul got a drink and sat at the bar until he was approached. Several guys tried to get Paul to dance, but he politely turned them down. Paul was looking for someone who had a more settled, lonely loner approach, and soon enough he came along and sat next to Paul at the bar, which is when they struck up a conversation. Chapter 37, Players Wanna Play. Paul and his new associate hit it off well, and after a few too many drinks, the men decided to go out for a smoke on the patio. Paul's new friend Elliot suggested the two get better acquainted back at his place, and Paul agreed, following Elliot to his apartment. Ironically, Paul felt comfortable with Elliot, like he never had before with anyone else. Interestingly enough, Paul had never been with an openly gay man, but he couldn't let Elliot know who he really was because he would likely turn him in. Paul, however, did reveal to his new companion that he had breasts because he was transitioning, and Elliot totally understood. It was a reaction Paul wasn't expecting, considering every other man he had ever been with were either predators wanting to abuse and dominate him, or down low in the closet gay men cheating on their girlfriends or wives. Nevertheless, Paul and Elliot engaged in a pleasurable sexual encounter together, and strangely, Paul wasn't haunted by the sound of voices in his head. Afterwards, Paul told Elliot he needed to leave because he had to be to work early. Elliot totally understood and proceeded to walk Paul out, but stopped to take a glance at the news, which had Pesha's face plastered across the screen. Elliot gasped at the breaking news report, recognizing Pesha was Paul. When Elliot turned to Paul, all Paul could say were words he had never uttered before. "I'm sorry." Then Paul all of a sudden snapped and slit Elliot's throat before walking out calmly. Chapter 38, A Run for the Border. Paul had just killed the only guy that had ever made him feel good, and he wasn't happy about it. He had left his mark all over Nevada and rocked the world of Sin City once and for all. Now it was time to make a run for the border. With a long journey ahead of him, Paul was left with nothing but his thoughts and multiple personalities to comprehend, not to mention all the voices in his head, while the federal authorities were in hot pursuit to track him down. CHATA PESHA, the notorious sin transgression serial killer, had made breaking news in all 50 states and beyond. With her clever and meticulous moments, she misled and bamboozled authorities all along the way. Now, CHATA PESHA was embarking upon a great escape to avoid being captured. By the end of CHATA PESHA's murderous rampage in the United States, she had claimed the lives of 66 victims in total. Furthermore, 15 hours years later, CHATA PESHA crossed the Mexican border successfully under the alias Paul Freelands, which is where he currently resides. Paul underwent plastic surgery and completely changed his identity to prevent from being discovered. But the FBI has never stopped searching for PESHA, although the public was relieved murders had stopped suddenly. Chapter 39, Adapting to New Life. Paul still had his murderous urges and continued his killing spree in Mexico without leaving his signature calling card. After his last kill in the United States of Elliot, Paul figured out what he could do to tame or at least manage his psychotic ways and the voices for short periods of time. Paul's plastic surgery to his face completely changed his look, yet he still had his plan was to live as a transitioning gay man for a year to keep from drawing in any suspicion, and later resume his life as a transgender woman when he could safely change his identity and gender legally in Mexico. Paul set his sights on Cancun to permanently live. A lot of tourists visited the area, and Paul was able to blend in well. After 5 years, Paul learned he could become a legal Mexican citizen, which is what he intended to do. Chapter 40, The Hunt Continues. Paul figured if he could stay under the radar, then perhaps that was his best option. Meanwhile, back in the United States, the FBI didn't give up on locating CHATA PESHA, who they found hard to believe seemingly just vanished into thin air. PESHA's car was discovered abandoned near Paradise, Nevada, which was confiscated for further trace evidence. Rental companies in the area were tracked, as well as car theft data, in an effort to narrow down PESHA's movement. It was already known and verified PESHA did not take any flights, buses, or trains out of the area, so authorities figured. However, he was getting around by personal mode of transportation. There was no luck on reports of cars missing in the area, but there was a report of an unreturned rental car. Local law enforcement obtained the report and sent it to the federal authorities. It seemed the car was rented by a man. At first, this tip was overlooked considering CHATA PESHA wasn't the name on the document. But it couldn't be a coincidence, agents thought. So an investigation was formed to track the vehicle and the renter of it, and reports confirmed that vehicle crossed the Mexican border by an individual by the name of Paul Freelands with no other passengers. It was the red flag the feds needed, as they believed PESHA changed her identity to flee to Mexico. The FBI had no jurisdiction in Mexico, and the FBI Most Wanted list couldn't help them capture CHATA PESHA, whose identity was legally female in the United States, as was the photo used in the Most Wanted database. At most, the FBI could contact Mexican officials about the stolen vehicle of the person currently in Mexico, but that wasn't enough to detain the suspect or to extradite him back to the United States, since he wasn't charged with a crime. The FBI technically didn't know for sure if Paul was actually PESHA. Chapter 41, Rolling the Dice. It was surely a long shot, but federal authorities contacted Mexican authorities anyway, asking if they could locate the vehicle discreetly and get back to them. Little did they know, Paul had sold the car upon his entry to Mexico to some locals that owned a chop shop. By now, the car the tried to track down Paul Freeland to see if it was indeed CHATA PESHA. Just before the mission began, FBI got a lucky break when finally hearing back from the Mexican authorities. Apparently, the car couldn't be located, but it was disclosed that Paul Freeland was living and working in Cancun, Mexico, but they had no probable cause to approach him or apprehend him for a crime. Chapter 42, Operation Hide and Seek. Without Paul being able to use his past credentials, obtaining suitable employment and income within his expertise was hard to accomplish, which means Paul had to settle for mediocre work and less earnings outside his work field. Luckily, Paul had a pretty penny saved, which he never secured with a banking institution, so that it couldn't be frozen or seized if and when he had to go on the run. In fact, Paul kept a stash of cash and falsified identifications on his person at all times. Although Paul wasn't really the sociable type, without good reason of course, he took a liking to the gay scene, which is where he found new partners from time to time. Inspired by the nightlife and tourist attractions, Paul obtained gainful employment full-time at a popular beach resort as an operations manager, giving him access to plenty of cheerfully gullible tourists and carefree partiers looking for a good time on the regular basis. Paul had already started the process of his full transition to a woman, but had not changed his name yet in Mexico. Regardless, Paul no longer looked anything like CHATA PESHA physically. He wasn't blonde anymore, but instead, brown was Paul's new color of choice. All was well, or so Paul thought, blending in with the gay scene and working at Temptation Cancun Resort. What could go wrong? Unbeknownst to him, perhaps that wonder of a thought might be answered sooner than later. Arrangements were made, and Special Agents Zach Perinsky and Cynthia Blake was all set for their undercover mission to Cancun, Mexico. The agent's task was to simply locate Paul Freeland and see if they could make a positive identification of CHATA PESHA. With direct orders received, both Zach and Cynthia proceeded with their mission. The trip was only a little over a 5-hour drive to the Mexican border, so they chose to drive the distance themselves. Meanwhile, Paul had no idea the authorities were on to him or had discovered his whereabouts, but he was in for a rude awakening. Nevertheless, Paul's housing accommodations were included with his job, which meant he had residency at the Temptation Cancun Resort due to his demanding position, which consumed a lot of his time. However, Paul also rented a Cancun Inn nearby as well for more privacy. When free time permitted him to disappear from prying eyes. But it was a busy weekend, and the resort was fully booked, which means Paul had to be on duty all weekend, working 12-hour shifts each day for the upcoming events. Chapter 43, Stranger Things. To Paul, it was just another day in his life on the run. He had no expectations that anything out of the ordinary would occur. The eventful activities of the weekend at the resort would surely bring about an exciting hunt for Paul's newest victim. Little did Paul know, his devious plans were bound to be rudely interrupted by unexpected guests he would be shocked to see. Agents Zach and Cynthia had made their grand entrance into Mexico. They would have much rather been on vacation, but instead, the partners were on a mission to track down a serial killer. With knowledge of what general area Paul was in, the agents made their way to Cancun by flight after they arrived to Tijuana, Mexico. In a little over 4 hours, Zach and Cynthia would have their work cut out for them as they attempted to track down this Paul person they believed to actually be PESHA. The day was long as Paul performed his daily duties. Tourists and other resort guests were flooding in, eager to indulge in some exciting fun. Paul, however, was finding it difficult to focus with what seemed to be like a million voices in his head. He unfortunately needed to take the edge off if he was going to make it through the day, which is also why he frequently excused himself to retreat back to his office to indulge in a bit of substance abuse himself. The relentless voices encouraged Paul to kill time and time again, so much so it was overwhelming at times, which interfered in Paul's completing his task in an orderly fashion. But on this day, the resort was hosting a huge party for the guests where thousands were likely to attend. If Paul was lucky, then perhaps he'd find his target, he thought. Around 6 p.m., Zach and Cynthia arrived in Cancun, Mexico. Drained from all the traveling and ready to check in to their hotel after reporting to their boss of their arrival to their assigned destination. The plan from there was to narrow down Paul's whereabouts exactly to engage contact. To do that, the agents had to track Paul's previous movements to determine what areas he frequented most, then maybe they could successfully find and dress for him. Since the agent already was aware that Paul no longer had the vehicle, it would be easy enough for them to check to see if Paul had registered any other vehicle or obtained identification or driver's license in Mexico. Yet upon checking, Paul had obtained any other vehicle or Mexican identification. Agents Zach and Cynthia's jobs became all the more hard, but they were up for the challenge. It seems they would likely have to take more of an old-school approach to find someone possibly living off-grid and on the run. So the agents figured their best option was to start visiting some of the tourist spots to ask around if anybody knew of him. If lucky, then maybe they could find out where Paul was working. He had to be getting income from somewhere, and the agents thought out loud amongst each other as they worked from other factors they had about the unsub, like the fact PESHA is gay, so likely if Paul is really PESHA, then he might find comfort within the gay scene. Out on the town, the agents went, and the gay clubs and bars were first on their list to check for a sighting on Paul. With it being the weekend, every place of business was packed, from restaurants to clubs and bars, and even the beach. It was like looking for a needle in a haystack. Almost every club and restaurant in the tourist district was way too occupied to talk. But a few of the bars had chatty bartenders who could manage to do more than one thing at a time. Several places proved to be hotspots Paul had frequented, but no one had seen him in a while or knew where he worked or lived. Just as Agent Zach and Cynthia was about to give up for the night, they stopped by the 1111 Club and the Laser Heart Bar Beer and Queer Club. The 1111 Club owner identified Paul right away, describing him as a weird one who just sat and watched others every time he stopped by the club. The club manager didn't know where he lived, but said he often seen him on the beach lurking around. The laser hut bar, Beer and Queer, turned out to be the agent's smoking gun. The bartender said he got to know Paul pretty well because every time he came in, he sat at the bar in the same place the entire time, just drinking and watching. The bartender just figured he was just an introvert or scared to socialize or perhaps embrace his sexuality. By the end of the conversation, the bartender named Adam revealed Paul told him he worked and lived at the Temptation Resort. Hot damn, Zach and Cynthia thought they got what they came for after all. But it was late and the agents were tired, so they decided to wait until the following day to go check Paul out. It wasn't like he was going anywhere anyway, so the agents reported their findings thus far and got some rest before the next big day to come. 1:45 Saturday. Paul, highly intoxicated on cocaine and vodka cocktails, found his new victim to play with. With all resort events functioning as scheduled, when Paul made his rounds, he found himself some free time to wander about carelessly. Out of the blue, Paul was approached by the very guy he had his eyes on the entire night, whom just so happened needed to locate the service staff who were assigned to his suite. The gentleman said he was needing to locate an item he dropped in the laundry by accident when his sheets were dressed by the staff. First, Paul agreed to assist the man in finding his watch. Paul escorted the guest in the direction of the laundry room for the service workers, but detoured him by luring him to an empty banquet room. Paul then proceeded to strangle the man with an extension cord used for the machine to wax the floors that was left behind. Paul used such extensive force he broke the guest's neck, which fell limp as he loosened his grip. Paul then raped the dead corpse of the unsuspecting victim, ripped his anus as he vigorously forced himself on the man who was virgin to sodomy. Paul then left the man laying there with the cord still wrapped around his neck and his ass bare and exposed. Paul walked away calmly, exiting through a rear service door so that no one would spot him as he went on to conduct his other duties as if nothing were wrong at all. End of his exhausting shift, Paul retreated to his room without any further incident, but around 3 a.m., Paul was dispatched to report to the office for a level 6 urgent meeting. Paul was actually expecting the call, as a level 6 code is the alert of the death of a guest. Chapter 44, Shock and Amazement. The entire morning hours were hectic as resort management and staff worked to keep guests away from the crime scene and unaware a murder investigation was going on. Staff did not want the guests to be startled or so afraid they'd leave the resort, but news travels fast. Anyway, as the slain guests or friends or family that accompanied them had to be alerted when the police arrived. The day was crazy enough, but things had just gotten more severe as PESHA recognized 2 individuals entering the main lobby of the resort. It was none other than Agent Zach and Cynthia Blake. Paul nearly jumped out of his skin upon seeing his former coworkers, but he knew they had no jurisdiction in Mexico, so they couldn't be there to investigate the recent murder there. Although they were looking around very suspiciously, seeing local Mexican authorities there when they arrived. They both had that look in their eyes, like they were wondering what the hell was going on. Paul stayed out of sight, but observed from a distance. The agents wore casual clothes and looked like tourists. They didn't even have their badges around their neck, but it was surely on them somewhere, Paul thought. They must have found out his alias and about the car, Paul assumed. But he had plastic surgery, so surely they wouldn't suspect him of being CHATA PESHA as long as he played it cool if they came into contact with him. Regardless, Paul was a nervous wreck, trying to figure out what to do. How did they find him there, he wondered. Paul watched as Zach and Cynthia checked in at the front desk, as they had made reservations for a room. Then Paul quickly went to his office to recuperate from the sudden shock, but the voices had him in a frenzy. He paced the floor and pulled his own hair while talking to himself aloud. Chapter 45, Thinking of a Master Plan. Paul's mind continued to race as thoughts incoherently ran a mile a minute. He badgered himself profusely to figure out what to do next. How could he act normal and remain calm when he was literally having a mental nervous breakdown? Paul's anger grew rapidly because without a doubt, he knew someone must have took the fence off to his whereabouts. He thought out everyone he could have told where he worked, and the only person that came to mind. Paul vowed to find the bartender that ratted him out and make him pay severely. But in the meantime, Paul needed to try to avoid Zach and Cynthia by any means necessary, and if push came to shove, mislead them in the most efficient way possible. Zach and Cynthia reluctantly checked in to the Temptation Resort, knowing it was sure to be a real live swinging oasis in the midst of their observations and investigation. But it was all a part of the mission, so Zach and Cynthia played the happy, hot party role right along with all the other guests at the resort. After settling in their rooms, the pair decided to take a tour of the resort with the hopes of running into Paul for a casual chat. The agents knew if Paul recognized them or became tense or nervous at their presence, then likely Paul is actually PESHA. However, they were hoping that perhaps PESHA looked the same for an affirmative identification so they could start the extradition process. Only time would tell, but at least they were able to quickly and efficiently track Paul down. Paul stayed hidden in his office as long as he could, but with the busy weekend, several scheduled events, and a murder investigation was going on at the resort. It was impossible for the operations manager to stay hidden, but that put him at risk for running into the secret agents lurking around as well. Nevertheless, he had to manage to the best of his ability. However, this crazy day couldn't end soon enough for Paul, as he was planning to sneak away later to pay someone a visit. Zach and Cynthia made their way to the ground floor, main lobby, to take a look around. They both were curious about the police presence when they first arrived, and from the looks of things, they were still at the resort, even though a flimsy attempt to keep matters discreet was underway. While walking down the hall near the elevators, Zach spotted a familiar face whom seemed to be overseeing whatever they were working on. Zach nudged Cynthia to come along. Perhaps they could get a closer look to see what was going on exactly. Turns out the Mexican chief of police and crime scene investigations were working on something pretty serious. Both Zach and Cynthia knew of the chief, as he was their first contact upon their arrival to Mexico before they contacted their boss back in Las Vegas. The agents approached the chief, who was standing outside the banquet room door, which had been blocked off with crime scene tape. Surprised to see the two of them, the chief greeted the agents and asked if they knew what was going on. Both Zach and Cynthia replied they had no knowledge of the crime, and then they eagerly asked what was going on exactly. The chief explained a gruesome murder had occurred at the resort of a male guest who had been asphyxiated and brutally raped. The agents looked at each other in shock. Sounds like CHATA PESHA's kind of MO. As the chief continued to explain that much, if any, evidence left behind. Was it a coincidence the agents were searching for a serial killer, only for a murder to happen at the very same resort they were tracking a subject at? The agents wondered. Cynthia asked the chief if the body or any other object had a Hebrew symbol on it, but the detective didn't report such a thing to him. Or perhaps this was just an unfortunate ransom murder, Zach added. Yeah, maybe. So, replied the chief. The agents then excused themselves and bid the chief farewell as they casually strolled down the hall back to the entrance of the lobby. Chapter 46, Out of Sight, Out of Mind. Paul ducked and dodged all day to keep from encountering Zach or Cynthia, but he knew that likely wouldn't last for very long. From time to time, Paul seen the two lurking around as if they were looking for something in particular. He was certain he was the someone they were looking for. Thankfully, the end of his shift was fast approaching, so perhaps he could outsmart the agent a while longer. But just as Paul thought his clever tactics were efficiently working, the unthinkable happened. Paul was dispatched on his walkie-talkie to come to the front desk. Assuming it was only an employee error, Paul didn't hesitate to answer the call. But much to his surprise, upon his arrival, did the receptionist make him aware there were two people who were asking for him personally and waiting in the guest lounge. Paul's heart felt like it sunk. He knew exactly who was asking for him. Now he needed to toughen up, appear confident, and act like he didn't know the guest. Paul gathered his thoughts and put on his best face to approach the guest. Promptly, at the sight of Paul, both Cynthia and Zach stood at attention as if they were already familiar with him. Welcome to Temptation Resort. How can I help you, Paul? Someone cheerfully said with a crooked smile. Zach and Cynthia boldly stared at Paul as if they were inspecting his entire character while profiling him silently in their head. They both took turns making small talk, then finally they got to the point by lying and testing Paul at the same time. Cynthia claimed the pair of them were associates with the rental company and was sent to inquire about the vehicle he rented and never returned. Paul knew right away they were lying on purpose, trying to get a reaction out of him. Paul knew both the FBI agents personally because they their bluff and played along, replying that upon him getting to Mexico, the car was stolen, but he also continued in saying he purchased the most expensive and exclusive insurance package through the rental car company, which would cover loss, stolen, or damage to the vehicle at all. Paul could tell Zach and Cynthia wasn't aware of the insurance and looked puzzled or rather blank-faced. Zach confirmed quickly, "Oh yes, of course. We just wanted to be sure," he said. Paul said, "Oh, okay, no problem. Well, if that'll be all, I must return to my duties." Yes, of course," Cynthia interrupted. "Hey, by the way, do I know you from somewhere, Paul?" she said. "No, I don't think so," Paul insisted. "I'm from a very small town," he added. "Sure, okay," Cynthia cautiously said. "Well, you have a good day now." "Thank you," Paul said, as he casually walked away. Zach and Cynthia watched Paul until he was out of sight. They sat back down in the guest lounge and ordered a drink while the two of them whispered amongst each other. Agent Zach asked Cynthia what she thought of Paul. Cynthia replied, "Well, unfortunately, he looks nothing like PESHA, but something feels off with him, even though he didn't act like he knew us at all." Zach said, "Yeah, that's what I noticed as well. It's pretty hard to act like you don't know someone when you're face to face with them." "So what do we do now? Tell the director?" Cynthia wondered aloud. "We just report what we observe," Zach added. "Maybe we should stay another day or so to interview others who may know him," Cynthia suggested. "That we definitely gotta clear with the boss," Zach muttered, as he gulped down the remainder of his beverage. Chapter 47. Criminal on the Loose. As soon as Paul was out of the eyesight of the imposters he knew was actually agents, he hightailed it out of there as quick as he could. Paul finished his shift and signed out for the day before departing from the resort. There were several things Paul had in mind to do, but first he had an urgent errand to run. It was 9 p.m., and Paul knew the bar didn't open until 10 p.m., so the employees would be there alone, setting up for the night. So he got a ride to the corner of Avenue 45, which is where a Laser Bar Beer and Queer is located. Paul waited outside in the alley behind the bar in anticipation of running into the bartender that blew his cover. It only took about 15 minutes for the unsuspecting bartender to come barging out the door, toting empty liquor bottles and boxes to haul to the dumpster. Paul appeared out of nowhere and startled the bartender, who was in his own world, mumbling lyrics to music as he attended to his duties. Shocked, he dropped everything he was carrying and shouted, "What the hell are you doing back here, man?" A possessed look came over Paul's entire face as he replied, "Waiting for you." Before the bartender could even respond, Paul swiftly swung his blade, which severely sliced the bartender's neck. His throat was cut so deeply, Paul damn near decapitated him. The bartender's body fell to the ground lifeless instantly, and Paul nonchalantly walked away without even blinking an eye. Then the cold-hearted, ruthless Paul proceeded to hitch a ride back to the resort for some more unfinished business. Paul slipped back into the resort without even being noticed and made his way to the kitchen to check room service tickets. It was a long shot, but Paul was hoping by chance that maybe vicariously nosy agents may have ordered room service. Luckily for him, they had, but their dinner had already been delivered. There was, however, a room service ticket for the following morning's breakfast. Paul wanted to send the agents a little parting gift before they were due to check out of the resort. So he made special arrangements to lace their breakfast with poison, discreetly, just enough to make them ill, and Paul was tickled pink at the idea. Cynthia even had a peanut allergy that Paul was aware of. She planned to use to his advantage. Chapter 48, Something Just Ain't Right. Bright and early, Paul was up with the birds for yet another 12-hour shift. Zach and Cynthia's breakfast arrived promptly at 9 p.m. The two devoured every bite and hauled their lunches to the main lobby to check out while waiting on the transportation to their next destination. Zach looked focused and alert, but Cynthia wasn't looking too good as she appeared disheveled on their way out Monday morning. Paul eagerly watched from a distance as relief fell over him instantly by seeing the agents leaving, hopefully once and for all. Zach and Cynthia boarded their ride out of there without delay, but upon them driving away, Cynthia told Zach something was wrong. She didn't feel well. She didn't feel good at all, and Zach could see it all over her face. Cynthia began to sweat and itch profusely all over her body. I think I'm having an allergy attack, she said to Zach, who alerted the driver to take them to the nearest hospital. But by the time the two of them arrived, Zach too felt sick to his stomach, so much so he could no longer withhold his vomit or bowels. Both agents were rushed to the emergency room and given a diagnosis of food poisoning due to likely contamination. Zach recovered well, and fluids replenished his body of natural nutrients, but Cynthia's allergic reaction sent her into shock. She was having a hard time breathing on her own. At some point in time, Agent Zach received an urgent call. Turns out the bartender they talked to days ago, when they first arrived, had been found dead Sunday night. Zach couldn't connect all the dots just yet, but something sinister was definitely going on. The agent's boss ordered them back to Las Vegas as soon as Agent Cynthia Blake recovered. But unfortunately, Agent Blake didn't make it. The combination of food poisoning and the peanuts in her food, which caused her allergy attack, was too much for her system at once. She never did fully recover, and by the next day, she went into convulsions and flatlined. Agent Cynthia Blake was pronounced deceased on Tuesday morning at 6 a.m. Agent Zach Kerensky was flabbergasted as he wallowed in grief and disbelief his partner was gone. Chapter 49, Time to Make a Change. Paul didn't want to take any chances with another close call. He knew he needed to do something as soon as possible before matters got any worse. Paul was planning to wait a year before changing his name legally in Mexico, but he felt the need now to make the sudden change immediately to completely change his identity altogether yet again. Paul was pretty clever with getting fake documents for legal purposes, but he needed someone to get him a new birth certificate. So he traveled to a shadier side of town and asked around. It wasn't long before some handy Mexican thugs offered to help him out for the right price, $10,000 to be exact, but it was worth every penny to Paul if he could change his identity in a hurry before more agents or spies showed up in Mexico. Within 72 hours, Paul had made a major transformation yet again as he became a she once again. Now assuming yet another alter ego alias no one else was aware of previously, but in fact, every other alias or identity CHATA PESHA had formally used were actually multiple personalities that had always been with and inside her all along. However, proper, legal, and binding documentation was filed, as well were the standard processing fees applied, now known as Shelley Barron, and once again living freely as a transgender woman. She was hoping this would keep the federal authorities away from her for good. If they could no longer find CHATA PESHA or Paul. Although yet and still on the FBI's most wanted list, Shelley didn't worry because the plastic surgery altered her facial appearance. As long as Shelley didn't get arrested or fingerprinted for any reason, then the authorities shouldn't be able to find her. Because when she worked for the FBI, all federal employees' fingerprints were uploaded to a database. So if her fingerprints were pinged for any reason, it would alert the government immediately. Shelley knew she had to be careful not to blow her cover, but otherwise, Shelley assumed all was well for the time being, even though she contemplated finding another job, just to be on the safe side, in case anybody else showed up looking for Paul, or either PESHA. But for the time being, Shelley stayed in her secure position at Temptation Resort. Chapter 50, If Only There Were a Cure. Killing. Shelley's only problem in her own mind, although she had several underlying issues that needed to be rectified. The voices in her head and all her multiple personalities clashed with her daily as they didn't see killing as a problem at all. In fact, they encouraged her to embrace the idea of endless bloodshed. And Shelley did indeed have a thirsty thrill for the kill, but it was becoming more and more risky to hide her dark side. The more she tried to ignore her evil urges, the more unsatisfied and discombobulated she became. It was hard to keep a low profile while managing a raging, mentally ill serial killer on the inside. So the senseless murders continued. And in between slayings, Shelley took pleasure in exposing down low, in the closet gay men who thought it was okay to use her for a cheap thrill of their own by night, and shamelessly attacking, bullying, laughing at, and fronting on by day in front of their wives, girlfriends, and male buddies. Shelley was tired of being treated like a doormat, so she decided to get her lick back by ruining the perfect little lives of lying jerks. Chapter 51, And It All Falls Down. Shelley went over and beyond to expose several men in an effort to ruin their life. She recorded the affairs with them, stalked, harassed, and even threatened them. Many men Shelley blackmailed money out of them, then reneged on the deal and outed them to their female lovers, business partners, and friends. Shelley was so unapologetically relentless with her heinous attacks against the selfish, cowardly men that she even secretly exploited guys at Temptation Resort who were only guests sneaking and creeping around on their woefully ignorant wives and girlfriends. Many of them Shelley didn't have sexual encounters with, but she found their toxic, careless was reckless, hypocritical behavior pathetic. Wealthy men, businessmen, middle-class men, hustlers, players type men, gangsters, thugs, predatory type of men, religious men, leadership role men, and every other man in between. Married, engaged, widowed, divorced, single, switch-hitting men. It didn't matter. Shelley exposed them all. It was her pleasure, a temporary cure from killing so much. She found a new way to kill a man softly, and it felt almost as good as shedding his blood. Shelley carried on with her devilish deeds for quite some time. That is until her bad behavior caught up with her when some of the men angrily decided to attack back because Shelley ruined their lives. It got to the point where men wanted to kill or hurt her while other men were afraid of her or foolishly attracted to her because they didn't know her. The way Shelley had to constantly look over her shoulder and watch her surroundings at all times. Chapter 52, Fatal Mistake. To prevent public spectacles and embarrassment, the men Shelley double-crossed didn't go to the authorities to protect their image and families, but something was about to take place that would change Shelley's life forever. However, she relentlessly continued to play her dangerous little game, thinking she was untouchable and invincible. But Shelley was about to meet her match, and little did she know, shit was about to get real in a deadly match of fight or flight. It was just another day at the Temptation Cancun Resort. Fun, excitement, freaky oasis, and happy tourists coming and going. But on this day, Shelley had the pleasure of meeting a very important and wealthy elite public figure. Mr. Alvin Sanchez was not only filthy rich, but very powerful as well. Just another one to bite the damn dust as far as Shelley was concerned. But she was really testing her luck and pushing her limits with this one. Shelley just couldn't resist the urging temptation, especially since Mr. Sanchez went over and beyond to flirt with her. He was obviously interested in more than friendly, casual conversation, even though he was married and accompanied by his wife and their other guests. Mr. Sanchez was like none other as far as his status. Sure, Shelley had her pick of the litter, whom she seduced and became sexually entangled with. Plenty of them were middle class to upper class men, but Mr. Alvin Sanchez was a multi-millionaire who also come from a very prominent, wealthy, elite, prestigious family bloodline. Thrill-seeking Shelley was about to be playing with fire while doing the tango with danger. But if she wasn't careful, it might be her last daring dance with the devil. Turns out, Mr. Sanchez and his wife were indeed swingers, but Shelley was Miss Sanchez wasn't aware her husband took a liking to other men, or transgenders, who were still packing their penis. Something that was obviously apparent considering Mr. Sanchez didn't invite Shelley to join he and his wife and their other swinger friends. No, he only wanted to meet with Shelley discreetly, out of view or knowledge of anyone else, which totally infuriated Shelley. Deep down, she totally hated sneaky jerks like Mr. Sanchez, who think their money can buy them whatever they want, and their power can control or manipulate whomever they want. Mr. Sanchez was nothing more than an arrogant, possessive, rich asshole who treated Shelley like one of his sideboards. But payback was a trans bitch, and Shelley was planning to expose Mr. Sanchez when he least expected. Meanwhile, the Sanchezes and their swinger friends parlay in luxury, occupying Temptations Resort presidential suite. However, between time, whenever Mr. Sanchez felt extra freaky, risque, he summoned Shelley like his own little playmate sex slave. Shelley played along for a while. After all, Mr. Sanchez was real generous with his money, but she soon grew tired of his smug attitude and kinky special requests. Not to mention the total disrespect and disregard when he was in company of his wife. Alvin Sanchez used Shelley for his own ill will, then tossed her aside like she was nothing at all. Shelley was fed up and began recording their freak fest sessions. Besides Mr. Sanchez's secret lust for men and transgender, he also had another dirty little secret he desperately wanted to hide. Under that hardcore, tough, macho man facade, Mr. Sanchez liked playing dress up to role play, and he wanted to be dominated and penetrated. Amongst many other freaky, kinky, taboo requests, but Shelley was done being used, and instead decided to use the proof she had to her advantage. So early one morning, Shelley arranged a package for Mrs. Sanchez and left it at the front desk for her to pick up. Then she sat back and waited for the fireworks to explode. The front desk attendant alerted Mrs. Sanchez of the package, and she promptly picked the yellow envelope up on her way to the spot. Mrs. Sanchez was furious at its contents, which included photos of her husband in compromising positions, not only with Shelley, but even other men Shelley had secretly caught him with during their stay at the resort. Mrs. Sanchez aggressively confronted her husband, and a brutal argument and fight erupted. Shelley sat back enjoying every minute of the commotion, and soon enough, Mr. Sanchez began to repeatedly call her phone, which she ignored on purpose. That should teach him about treating people like a doormat. But the truth of the matter was, Mr. Sanchez didn't give a damn about anyone except himself. Before long, Shelley started receiving a threatening text and voicemails from Alvin Sanchez, something in which Shelley didn't take a liking to. So she sent a video to the Sanchez phone of a sex tape she threatened to release publicly unless she received $100,000 for her pain, suffering, humiliation, and threats by Mr. Sanchez. To say the Sanchezes were furious was an understatement, but they didn't want to report the issue because of their family's reputation and image was on the line. The Sanchezes and their guests abruptly departed the resort and never returned, only sending hired staff to retrieve their belongings. Shelley never did hear back from the Sanchezes about the $100,000 she demanded, but by the end of the day, a single message pinged Shelley's phone, which read, "You'll be sorry for this. We will see each other again." The message also included the instructions for Shelley to pick up a package left for her at the security desk. Upon Shelley's retrieval of the obvious package, which included a check for $100,000, was also a note that read, "Until we meet again, Shelley," or should I say, Paul? No, perhaps you prefer CHATA PESHA. well as continuing and saying, very matter-of-factly, "See, you're not the only one that knows some shit. So if you want to play, let's play. May the better man win." Shelley's stomach felt like she had just been gutted as her mouth dropped in shock. How in the hell Alan Sanchez find out who she really was? On top of the fact the bastard left Shelley a check, likely knowing she couldn't go to the bank without using her fingerprint to cash the check. It was a setup, and Shelley knew she had fucked up severely. The relentless voices began to possess her mind as she tried to think of an escape. Shelley knew if she didn't flee from Mexico, then Mr. Sanchez would have her killed or alert the authorities, considering he had several high-ranking government officials in his family and ties to the mob, as well as other powerful elite. Shelley ran to her room in a haste and began to vigorously pack her belongings. She began to have a mental breakdown as she eerily felt like she was being watched, even when she was alone in private. Shelley, however, in her fragile state, immediately arranged a ride to her Airbnb to gather her important documents and other personal items. After which, Shelley researched online for the first flight she could take. She knew she couldn't go back to the United States, so she sat anxiously pondering on her options. Finally, Shelley decided on France and booked her flight right away. The trip was 9.5 hours, but this was the best desperate move Shelley could make right away. Little did Shelley know, Mr. Sanchez used his connections to have all of her movements tracked. He even had her phone tapped and hacked into all of her accounts. It was being targeted. She didn't know it yet, or how severe things would get as she tiptoed around danger. But with her flight leaving at 9 p.m., she just decided to lay low until she headed to the airport, hoping that everything would be okay until then. Shelley didn't even give her job notice. The plan was just for her to disappear. Panic began to set in as Shelley continued to receive suspicious phone calls. Never in her life had she ever really experienced fear, but now she did. The voices tormented her more and more with every threatening phone call. Shelley selfishly desired to save her own life, yet having no remorse for all the lives she snuffed out herself. But now Shelley had met her match. She was so confused on how Alan Sanchez figured out who she was that she didn't know whether he was sending the feds or his killer goons after her. 7:45 p.m. Shelley's ride arrived to take her to the airport. Getting through airport security was another concern, yet was the least of Shelley's concerns and worries. If she could only get out of Mexico quick enough before something worse happened. Departure was at 9:40 p.m., so Shelley had plenty of time to get through security and check in, but upon her arrival, she noticed she was being followed by random individuals. It seemed all eyes were on her as the people around her behaved strangely. Interestingly enough, it wasn't airport staff that stopped and spied on Shelley. She knew deep down this was the doing of Mr. Sanchez. Was he following her? Shelley wondered. Would she ever be able to rid herself of this madman? Nevertheless, in spite of the stalking and harassment, Shelley made her way to the boarding dock. The suspenseful tensions all around Shelley nearly drove her insane as she tried to wait patiently to board her flight. Shelley frantically shook her leg while constantly looking over her shoulder to see who was around her. People mysteriously stared occasionally whenever they thought she wasn't looking, as if they were going to randomly ambush her when she least expected them to. Finally, the call was made for all passengers taking the flight from Cancun to France to board, and Shelley couldn't be more relieved, so much so that nausea from flying only for her second time completely disappeared. Shelley tried to even ignore the creepy-looking men who were on the same flight as she, while she nervously took her window seat on the plane. And although the journey was long, Shelley couldn't rest a wink. Sleeping was so far from her mind. Thousands of feet in the air, surrounded by suspicious-looking characters, more odd than even her, but maybe she was just paranoid, Shelley thought. Surely Mr. Sanchez wouldn't follow her all the way to Paris. Chapter 54, Great Escape. 9 hours, 22 minutes later, and Shelley had finally reached her destination. A new place, and starting all over again to try to rebuild her chaotic life. Shelley checked into the nearest hotel and breathed a sigh of relief, and she flopped down on the bed. Now all of a sudden, feeling quite smug about pulling off the greatest escape, now several times, as well as avoiding a billionaire bully with a hit out on her for exposing him, Shelley felt awfully sure of herself as she made plans on her next moves and how she was going to reinvent herself in her new home. If only she'd learned her lesson and laid low around, but of course her urges were getting the best of her as her cravings and desires amplified inside of her. She felt the need to get out, see the sights, and find someone new to prey on whom could fulfill her dangerously lustful temptations. But first things first, Shelley needed to find the shadier side of town so that she could score her favorite party favors before she hit up the local hotspots and bars. Shelley arranged transportation and went about her business to get a feel of the new place she called home. Chapter 55, Old Habits Die Hard. Had been a week, and Shelley was settling in just fine. She even met a new boy toy she had grown tired of already. Turns out the fun boys in France are just as down low, sneaky, and mischievous as the ops in the United States and Mexico. Same shit, a different day, she thought. However, Shelley did notice she wasn't just paranoid from the voices, but in fact, she still was being watched and followed. Someone was tracking her every move, so she had to be extremely careful. Little did she know, but Mr. Alvin Sanchez had indeed been keeping tabs on her. Mr. Sanchez had connections everywhere, and soon enough, Shelley would be in for a rude awakening by a surprise visitor. Despite the obvious stalking, Shelley occupied her first week in France looking for suitable housing to employment by day and walking on the wild side by night. Shelley's new little part-time boyfriend became rather possessive, even though he wasn't interested in being openly gay or involved with Shelley publicly. Yet he had the nerve to think that he could control her. Just the trigger Shelley needed to snap. Instead of exposing the poor jerk, Shelley drugged and disemboweled him one night, then threw him down a garbage shaft. Chapter 56. Peekaboo, I See You. A week later, his longtime girlfriend reported him missing, and the following week, his decomposing body was discovered in a landfill. No leads were ever recovered in the light of his murder, but ironically, someone started leaving news articles of his death and family pictures of him and his loved ones at the door of Shelley. Someone knew and was taunting Shelley about it, but she couldn't imagine who. She had only recently moved into her new apartment, and she didn't know anyone personally around her. Panic began to set in again as Shelley and all her multiple personalities had a mental breakdown as she hurt herself to cope with the agony of all the stress. This was supposed to be a new start, but she was being haunted, Shelley thought. Found it hard to believe Mr. Sanchez would stoop to such great lengths to get her back. How could he possibly know about her French lover or where she lived exactly? The random thoughts continued to plague Shelley's mind. One night, one right after the other, non-stop, for several hours, as she binged, drank alcohol, as well as indulged in heavy drug use in an effort to ease her mind. A day of isolation turned into 4. Shelley decided to go out. She wasn't hiding anymore. Shelley ran some errands and did some shopping before returning to her apartment. But upon her arrival, Shelley got the sickening feeling that something was terribly wrong. However, Shelley walked inside and closed the door behind her. Then she dropped all of her shopping bags in front of her when she heard a familiar male voice say, "Long time no see, stranger. Didn't I tell you we'd meet again?" Shelley sighed in utter disgust while slowly stepping backwards. Then Shelley gasped in sudden shock as she instantly turned to run out the front door, only for it to be blocked by a big, bulky, ugly bodyguard. Panic-stricken, Shelley was unfortunately faced with the fact uninvited guests invading her privacy were none other than Mr. Alvin Sanchez himself. Shelley couldn't believe she had eluded and fled authorities for years, yet the man before her had tracked her down like it was nothing. A million other thoughts plagued Shelley's mind, wondering what was next, if Mr. Sanchez called the police. But most of all, Shelley was hoping for the opportunity to kill Mr. Sanchez and his overly aggressive bodyguard. However, in the current moment, that seemed highly unlikely. Mr. Sanchez had a smug look on his face, thrilled at the pleasure of catching Shelley off guard. Short, stocky, cocky, multi-billionaire paced the floor as he casually lashed out subtle threats at Shelley, who was being held in place at the arm level by Mr. Tough Guy bodyguard. "It seems we have unfinished business," Mr. Sanchez insisted while forcing an agreeing response from Shelley. "Maybe you've forgotten about all the damage you've caused," he added, in a furious tone of voice. Shelley grew impatient, and she began to resist the strong hold of her captor. Overwhelmed with conflicting emotions, thoughts, and voices in her head, Shelley was on the verge of a psychotic mental breakdown as she began to talk to herself aloud. Hey, boss, who the hell is she talking to? Blurting out the guard. The hell if I know, said Mr. Sanchez, as he shook his head in disbelief. I always knew she was nuts anyway. Being an infamous fugitive on the run, isn't that right, CHATA PESHA? Mr. Sanchez assertively replied and asked, demanding a response. CHATA, PESHA, Paul, Trenica, Shelley, etc. were all in full effect and wide awake as they took a demonic form on the face of their captive. So what are we gonna do with her, boss? Said Armin, the bodyguard. Oh, I have a few ideas in mind, Mr. Sanchez eagerly said. But first, we're going to have a bit of fun. Tie her ass up and show her who's boss, Mr. Sanchez ordered. Yes, sir, Armin replied. For the next 2 hours, Mr. Sanchez in armor tortured Shelley physically, followed by another hour of brutal sexual assault. After the men had their way, Shelley was bleeding profusely from gaping wounds. Shelley couldn't move or utter a mumbling word any longer. She had no fight left in her when Mr. Sanchez ordered Aaron to put her out of her misery. Aaron didn't even hesitate and proceeded to cut Shelley's throat from ear to ear. Mr. Sanchez just sat back and watched while smoking a Cuban cigar. But unfortunately, it wasn't the end of his madness. After Mr. Sanchez was satisfied by Shelley's slow death, he then chopped off her penis and put it in her mouth. The men laughed while Mr. Sanchez joked, saying she always wanted to be a bitch, now she really is one. To make matters worse, Mr. Sanchez painted Hebrew sin transgression symbol on her forehead and left an arrogant note for authorities, simply saying, "You're welcome." At last, CHATA PESHA was finally free of all her burdens that plagued her entire life for so long. In spite of the untimely circumstance, ironically, she went out just like her more than 160 victims, with nothing more than her calling card to explain the gruesome crime. Mr. Sanchez and Iran thoroughly removed any existence of their presence being there and casually left, leaving CHATA PESHA and all of her other personalities behind. It was unclear as to how Mr. Sanchez knew who CHATA PESHA really was, but he had just eliminated and solved the biggest case and the most notorious transgender serial killer in modern day time. Chapter 57, A Shocking Break in the Case. It was 3 days before CHATA PESHA was found. After multiple complaints of an odor coming from her apartment was reported, authorities arrived for a welfare check and was shocked by the gruesome scene they stumbled onto. After discovering the body of whom they believed was Shelley Barron, the crime scene was secured and backup was called to process the scene. Upon the arrival of the French authority detective unit, they were instantly aware they were dealing with something much bigger, as they were familiar with the symbolisms left at the crime. However, authorities mistakenly assumed they were looking for a copycat or the sin transgression serial killer was in Paris, so they thought. After collecting evidence and making vital notes, the detectives reported back to their offices and started initiating contact with the FBI on their findings. As it was yet until worldwide news alert, CHATA PESHA, the sin transgression serial killer, was still on the loose and FBI's most wanted fugitive. When the director of the FBI got confirmation of the latest findings, it was a possible lead they needed to gain clarity of what became of CHATA PESHA. Thinking at the time the information was just another lead, 3 agents were sent to France to observe the latest findings for themselves. In the meantime, the recovered body was taken to the medical examiner's office for an autopsy. Before long, Paris police discovered Shelley Barron's identity was fraudulent. Further research was underway to determine who the victim really was. After several hours, authorities found out the victim using the alias Shelley Barron had only recently moved to Paris, traveling from Cancun, Mexico. Mexican authorities reported Shelley changed her name from Paul, but wasn't an original resident of Mexico, and she had only resided there for a period of 9 months, and was last employed at the Temptation Resort. Appalled at their latest findings, Paris authorities were hoping the FBI could shed light on the situation with any relevant information. The medical examiner's findings included a report stating the victim was naturally born male and had undergone plastic surgery and facial reconstruction. Also, the report stated the victim originally had blonde hair, green eyes, and a birthmark on her elbow. The medical examiner also noted the victim's injuries were severe, but she also had several other injuries that didn't heal properly that likely occurred over many years of her life. Since the victim's real identity couldn't be identified, her fingerprints were taken, as well as examination of her teeth. From there, the investigation was at a standstill for a couple of days until FBI's agents arrived in Paris to view the victim's body. Interestingly enough, the body didn't resemble CHATA PESHA last known attributes, but one of the agents recognized the victim as Paul, whom he and his late partner visited in Mexico. The agents didn't believe in coincidence and knew there had to be a connection between CHATA PESHA, Paul, and Shelley. The agents accompanied Paris detectives to their headquarters to check the analysis on the victim's fingerprints. The FBI requested the fingerprints be submitted through the National Fingerprint Database, in which Paris authorities did promptly. Within the hour, the anxious detectives and agents received an alert from the database. The authority figures couldn't believe their eyes when they got a hit on fingerprints and facial recognition. The entire room gasped in utter shock as the results revealed the victim was in fact CHATA PESHA. The agents couldn't believe, after all this time, their most wanted fugitive would succumb to such a fate. But deep down, everyone was glad a serial killer wasn't on the loose anymore. The federal agents contacted their superiors for further instruction and an update, and the Paris authorities successfully closed their case in the matter. Chapter 58, Conclusion. In the aftermath. The following days after the FBI's discovery, an announcement was made publicly worldwide. United States citizens were put at ease knowing the most notorious serial killer was confirmed deceased and could no longer terrorize anyone ever again. CHATA PESHA viciously and unmercilessly claimed the lives of more than 163 known victims, and it was believed to be more the authorities were unaware of as well, considering the fact she went a period of time of not leaving her calling card behind. CHATA PESHA's killing rampage started in her childhood in Hannibal, Missouri, and proceeded gradually to other states such as New Jersey, New York, California, Las Vegas, Nevada, and unfortunately even spilled outside the United States in Cancun, Mexico, and Paris, France. The Federal Bureau of Investigation offered their sincere apologies to all the victims' families, as well as their condolences for all the lives lost. As a result, to all the heinous crimes committed by CHATA PESHA under the nose of government officials, now a more vigorous hiring process, training, and background checks are conducted, as well as all agents are now required by law to pass mental health checks and psychological evaluations before obtaining employment. The end. That concludes today's story time with yours truly, Poetic Psychic Pisces, High Priestess. I thank you all for listening and watching. Please be sure to like, share, and subscribe. It would be greatly, greatly appreciated. And of course, I thank you all in advance. That is your free way of showing your support to the channel. Also, guys, in conclusion, I would like to say that this story was completely created by myself. This story, although very gruesome, was not in reference to particular persons or against any particular persons or their lifestyles. The reason, my reasoning behind this story is because in today's time, with so many different things changing, okay, in the world, there's been a lot more inclusion of the sexualities of other people. So I brainstormed on something that the world hasn't seen before, okay, in the terms of a serial killer. We've all heard of serial killers before, some young, some old, some men, some women, okay, but never in between the two. You understand what I'm saying? So I worked from that, which is how I created this story, guys, okay? So it wasn't meant to be in any disrespect to any persons in particular or any person's lifestyle, sexuality, background, upbringing, or anything like that. This wasn't done in a malicious effort to try to trigger anyone or anything like that. So I just want to make that, I want that to be known. And like I said, with every, really and truly, like I said, things are changing a lot in the world ever since, things like gay marriage and different things have been passed. There's been a lot more embrace of those who are gay, those who are, homosexual, those who are drag queens and transgenders and different things like that, or what have you. Even in shows that you're watching now, these persons who live these lifestyles are getting a lot more roles, okay? And I actually was thinking, I said, a lot of these persons want to be included more, and that means being included in everything, good, bad, and indifferent. You understand what I'm saying? And what the world has never heard of is a transgender serial killer. So this is how I created this story, guys, okay? But it is all authentic work created by myself, and like I said, it wasn't done in any malicious intent. Although I talked about real, real topics and real subjects. Like I've told you all before, I write. It's called like fact fiction, the way I write, okay? So the story in itself can be fiction, but I talk about real factual things that actually happen in the world, like serial killers is a real factual thing that happens that we know about in the world. Transgenders is a real thing that we know that it is in the world. Abuse, abandonment, bullying, these are all real things that we know that goes on in the world. So what I do is create a fictional story with factual things that goes on in the world, thus creating a fact fiction story. Okay, guys? So, as always, y'all take care of yourself, take care of each other, but most of all, take care of your babies, honey. Remember, this is a wicked, wicked world that we live in. There is wickedness in high places, and there is evil that's lurking around each and every corner, even in a neighborhood near you. So y'all watch your surroundings, watch the company you keep, watch the surroundings and the company in which your children are in as well. And consider the fact that you never know when someone may betray you, backstab you, try to hurt you, or harm you, honey. Keep your some protection on you. Y'all stay awake, stay aware, stay vigilant, and stay prepared. Because if you stay ready, you ain't gotta get ready, baby. Until the next time, peace, love, and light. Namaste. I am that I am, created in the image of God. And as always, guys, I like to show you all that this is my work. Okay. The entire 123 pages of my work. Okay, guys. So let me show you that.
Okay, guys, so as you all can see, honey, I actually still write, okay? A lot of people do a lot of things, on the computer these days, but I actually still write, which old-fashioned method, but sometimes things come out better on paper than you sitting in front of a computer screen, okay? So every one of these pages is written by me, okay? And you can see here, I started writing March 29th of 2024, and I actually finished May 2nd of 2024. I actually channel write quite fast. I actually can write a story like this in a week or two if I'm uninterrupted, but y'all know I juggle multiple jobs, doing multiple things, taking care of myself, taking care of my child, handling business, doing my readings, just doing a whole bunch of different other things. So I'm stopping and doing a little bit, writing a little bit, taking a break a little bit, writing a little bit, taking a break a little bit, so then it stretches out in how long I get a project done. Okay, so yeah, I just wanted to share that with you all, show you all, so nobody else can claim this for themselves, okay? Is why I show you all that this is indeed my work, guys, okay? So till the next time, peace, love, and light. Namaste. I am that I am, created in the image of God.